of England. Many here will have a mostly dry afternoon. Still pretty mild for the time of year, but obviously it doesn't feel all that mild when the showers come along. And more of these heavy showers around through this evening as well. I don't think anywhere immune from a downpour. Still fairly blustery initially, but the winds will actually ease overnight. And through the second half of the night, the showers die out as well. And so it will turn quite chilly. Temperatures well down into single figures in rural spots. So a fresh start to Wednesday, generally a bright and sunny start for quite a few, but that doesn't last. Another weather system comes in from the west, fairly angry one this, going to bring some very gusty winds around the coast of Wales, Northern Ireland, northwest England and into southern Scotland. Some heavy rain for Scotland and Northern Ireland too. So we do have Met Office yellow warnings in place. That band of rain will be pretty intense, but it will move through fairly quickly thanks to the very gusty winds. As I said, it could cause some disruption. So we do have Met Office yellow warnings in place. That rain will spread into eastern parts of England as we go through Wednesday evening and may well linger into Thursday across East Anglia and the southeast. Could be quite a wet day here on Thursday. Elsewhere, a mixture of sunshine and showers. Friday looks like being a dry and a bright day for most before more rain moves in on Saturday.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank and, of course, fun. Every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Hello everybody, this is GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys, on your TV, radio and online until 6 o'clock. Now, coming up, within the last few moments, a little bit of breaking news for you because Kent Police has announced that counter-terrorism police are now leading that investigation into the firebombing of a Dover immigration centre on Sunday. We'll bring you the latest very shortly with our Home and Security editor, Mark White. Counter-terrorism police now involved. The news comes as the Home Secretary is under pressure for her strong words on the migration crisis. Is our south coast being invaded? Is Britain being invaded? I want your views. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Suella Braverman is taking flack for her use of language, but isn't she just saying what many people are thinking? Do you think we are being invaded? Suella Braverman made the comments as she gave a statement to the House of Commons about overcrowding at the Manston Immigration Centre in Kent. Fake outrage is a distraction, if you ask me, from the big question. And that question is, where on earth do we put all of these people? Over 10,000 of the 40,000 or so people who've crossed the channel this year are from Albania. This is why Suella called out the gaslighting from across the House. We have to stop pretending that everyone coming across the channel is actually a refugee. They aren't. We have a GB News exclusive on how some of those people are starting criminal gangs. pushing migrants across the channel. Official sources have told us that many are now being used by the gangs to take over control of Britain's cannabis trade. We'll bring you the latest on that. By the way, the money they earn from that isn't staying in the country, is it? And this is a story that I'm absolutely all over, ladies and gentlemen. Matt Hancock is going into I'm a Celebrity. I'd like to see him face another kind of trial, to be honest with you, but it looks like I'll have to settle for watching him eat a kangaroo's testicle. Hey, someone better tell him where the cameras are this time, hadn't they? And in less than a month, some of the biggest stars in the world of sport will descend on Qatar for the World Cup. So officials in the UK have now come together today to decide if it's actually safe for fans to go. Better late than never, ever. The question is, if not, should it have been there in the first place? We're taking a deep dive into the Qatar World Cup. But before all of that, it's your latest headlines.
Good afternoon, 2 minutes past 3. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. The Home Secretary says large numbers of people are now being relocated from the Manston migrant processing facility in Kent. Suella Braverman told Cabinet they're being moved to other accommodation to relieve pressure caused by an unprecedented number of channel crossings. Around 4,000 people are thought to be at the centre, which is built to hold a maximum of 1,600. Well, Conservative MPs, including Andrew Bridgen, have been defending the Home Secretary after she described the influx of migrants as an invasion.
I think Suella Braverman is the best chance we've got of halting this. And she's getting a lot of pushback from the left because they know that she's serious about dealing with it. And quite honestly, if the Conservative government can't come up with a solution in the next 18 months, I think it's going to be very difficult for us at the next general election. Indeed, we've got local elections next May.
Counter-terrorism police are now leading the investigation into the petrol bombing of a Dover immigration centre on Sunday. Kent police have described the incident as targeted and likely to be driven by some sort of hate-filled grievance. However, the force says it may not necessarily meet the threshold of terrorism. The suspect has been named as 66-year-old Andrew Leekman, who was later found dead at a nearby service station. The UK's being warned household budgets could be further squeezed, with tax rises expected for years to come. The Prime Minister and the Chancellor are under pressure to balance the books, with up to £50 billion needed to fill a black hole in the public finances. The Daily Telegraph says it could be a combination of 50% tax rises and 50% spending cuts to be considered. A Treasury source told the paper it's going to be rough and everyone will need to contribute to maintain public services. Meanwhile, there'll be some additional support for people struggling with their energy bills. The National Grid has announced a £50 million fund to help them over the next 2 winters. The money will go to charities that offer emergency financial support to those using prepaid meters, as well as advice on payments and debt. Just Stop Oil protesters have tried to climb and lock themselves to the gates at Downing Street. The demonstrators also tried to block Whitehall, some sitting on the road, others glued themselves to the tarmac. They want the government to halt all new oil and gas licences. Sinn Féin's Stormont leader says the party's none the wiser on whether there'll be an election after holding talks with the Northern Ireland Secretary. Michelle O'Neill says Chris Heaton-Harris offered no clarity on how he plans to deal with the ongoing uncertainty at Stormont and accused him of making a bizarre U-turn by failing to call a vote last Friday. Well, speaking after their meeting, she said the public is continually being left in limbo.
I'm none the wiser today in terms of his next step. He didn't make that very clear. As I said, he didn't colour in the lines. He didn't say what his next move was. But, you know, you can't escape the reality that there's an obligation on him, a legal obligation on him to call the election. Instead, he's created a political vacuum.
Democratic Unionist Party leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson says he too is in the dark, but is prepared if there's a vote.
If an election is called, we are ready to fight that election. We're putting our candidates in place. We've our literature agreed. We're getting our campaign arrangements finalised. So if an election is called, we'll be there. We'll take our case to the people. We will seek to renew and indeed to strengthen our mandate.
The former Health Secretary Matt Hancock has had the Conservative whip suspended with immediate effect after signing up to a reality TV show. He's going to appear on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, with the Sun newspaper saying he's been confirmed as the 12th star to enter the Australian jungle. He resigned from Cabinet in June last year after breaching guidance on social distancing. The series starts this weekend, but Mr Hancock is expected to be one of 2 latecomers to join the camp. SpaceX has launched its Falcon Heavy mission for the first time in more than 3 years.
2, 1, 0, liftoff.
Well, the rocket left Florida's Cape Canaveral with Elon Musk's company sending a group of satellites into orbit for the US Space Force. You're up to date on GB News. I'll bring you more as it develops. Now, back to Patrick.
Welcome back, everybody. Now, we start this hour with a breaking statement from Kent Police, because within the last few moments, it's revealed that counter-terrorism police are now leading the investigation into that firebombing of the Dover Immigration Centre on Sunday. The suspect has also been named. It's part of a big package that we're doing here on GB News Live today with me, Patrick Christys, where we're going to be discussing some of the rhetoric that Suella Braverman used. Invasion, how do you feel about that? Do you think that Britain is indeed being invaded? The South Coast being invaded. What is Labour's plan to deal with this, and where on earth do we put all of these people? All of those big questions are going to be asked and hopefully answered right here with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News Live. But before that, GB News' Home and Security Editor Mark White joins me now. Mark, I believe you've got this statement on the latest developments into the Dover firebombing.
Yeah, confirmation from police that the suspect, who later went on to kill himself after launching this firebomb attack on that processing centre in Dover, was a 66-year-old man called Andrew Leake from High Wycombe in Buckinghamshire. Police have been searching that property in High Wycombe. They have now confirmed that counter-terrorism police will lead the investigation, although it doesn't necessarily mean that this is now formally declared a terrorist incident. We've had a statement from Detective Chief Superintendent Ollie Wright from counter-terrorism policing in the South East. Now, he says, we understand when counter-terrorism policing is involved, it can be worrying for some people, but I would like to reassure people that there is nothing to suggest any ongoing wider threat at this time. What appears clear, he says, is that this despicable offence was targeted and likely to be driven by some form of hate-filled grievance, though this may not necessarily meet the threshold of terrorism. And at this point, he says, the incident itself hasn't yet been declared as a terrorist incident, but significant that counter-terrorism policing are now leading that investigation. But the important takeaway from this, Patrick, is there is, according to the police, no wider threat out there, no others involved in plotting or indeed planning similar attacks in the days and weeks ahead.
Yeah, indeed. And Mark's going to stay with us, actually, because Mark has prepared a package for us. I'm just going to lead into that. Now, one of the big hooks for this show is I knew it would happen. I could see it coming a mile off. Yesterday, as I was live, sitting in this very chair, Suella Braverman stood up in the House of Commons, and there was a moment, almost like a light bulb moment, that went off when she used the word invasion, the invasion of our South Coast, and I thought, oh, grief, people are going to hang their hat on this. And I just wondered how you at home felt, you driving your cars, watching or listening online, whatever it is that you're doing. Do you actually feel as though we are being invaded? Do you think our Home Secretary was maybe echoing a use of language that is rattling around in your heads as well? From where I'm sitting, it seems to me anyway to be easier to criticise someone's rhetoric than it is to come up with a plan to actually stop what's going on. And I'm keen for us to not be distracted by that. But I want your views, GBviews at gbnews.uk. What Suella Braverman also said, Mark, was we need to stop calling all of these people refugees and asylum seekers. Some of them are, undeniably, but a lot of them are not. And I think for a lot of the British public, they've felt gaslit for quite a while into believing that we need to throw our arms around to all of these people who are all in desperate need. And it appears that that's not the truth.
Yeah, I mean, if people are honest, then they should be acknowledging the fact that not everyone coming across is a refugee, just in the same way as those that believe they're all criminals need to be honest and realise that there are some genuine refugees amongst them as well. Quite what the figures are, that's a difficult one because you get refugees, organisations, charities that come forth and say 80% of those who claim having come across the Channel get refugee status at the end of it. But that is disingenuous, because the truth is that from the start of this crisis in 2018, a tiny proportion, about 4% of those who've come across, have had their asylum claims properly settled. So we don't know actually what the final conclusion will be in terms of all those who are coming across the channel itself. But on that point, Patrick, about the fact that not everyone is refugees, Suella Braverman pointing out that many of them are Albanian, increasingly so, and that some are being brought about by criminal gangs. Well, we've been speaking to some official sources who've confirmed to us that indeed a significant number of those who are coming across from the Albanian diaspora into this country are being organised by Albanian criminal gangs to fill the criminal trade in this country. This is what I found in our exclusive look. Albanian gangs are the dominant force in organised crime across the UK. We've been told that Albanian crime groups are shipping hundreds of millions of pounds in criminal proceeds back to Albania every year. A number of different businesses, like car washes and barber shops, are often used to launder the proceeds of crime. But in truth, the vast majority of the money they make from their criminal endeavours is simply carried back to Albania by hand or in vehicles. Recently, border officials seized £300,000 bound for Albania in luggage at a UK airport. In another incident, £500,000 was found hidden inside a van at a UK port. Albanian crime gangs now control the majority of cannabis farms across the UK. They've taken over much of the cannabis cultivation trade from Vietnamese crime groups, with most of the Albanian cannabis farms concentrated in the north. But in pretty much every part of the country, you'll find Albanians are the dominant group involved in cannabis cultivation, as we found out recently in Suffolk. Is this what you're seeing time and again increasingly now, like other forces, that the Albanian organised criminal gangs are moving into these areas?
No, they are. They certainly seem to be on the up. They seem the dominant ones at the moment.
The trade in cannabis is largely self-contained amongst Albanian criminals here, with less control from crime bosses in their home country. In the south, they still control most of the cocaine trade, which is largely overseen by crime lords back in Albania. Across the UK, there has been a number of recent arrests of Albanians suspected of involvement in cross-channel people smuggling. Much of the surge in Albanians arriving by small boats lately is, we're told, being orchestrated by Albanian criminal gangs who want those people to work for them. Most of the people smuggling trade is still being controlled by Kurdish criminal gangs, but they are increasingly working in tandem with Albanian crime groups, who are advertising and arranging for people from the Western Balkan nation to head for northwest France before handing them over to the Kurdish gangmasters. Social media is a massive tool the Albanians have been using to good effect to attract their fellow countrymen and women. We've learned that the National Crime Agency has persuaded social media companies to remove 1,700 such videos in recent months. But for every one they delete, many more pop up, persuading Albanians to cross the channel and enter the UK's illegal economy.
Thank you very much, Mark White, our Home and Security Editor, for bringing us all of that. The emails have been coming in thick and fast so far. gbviews@gbnews.uk. I just want to touch on a couple of these before I continue to get stuck right into this top topic. It's on the idea of whether or not Britain actually is being invaded in relation to what Suella Braverman said in the House of Commons yesterday. The UK is not being invaded, that's war talk, but the UK is being inundated with migrants, legal and illegal. That's from Sam. And Patrick, good name, Patrick, says, yes, Suella is exactly right. This is an invasion on our south coast. Strong stuff coming in. That is just a snapshot of already the hundreds of you who've been getting in touch, so I really appreciate that. Keep them coming. We'll go to those throughout the show. But at a cabinet meeting earlier, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, said the UK will always be a, quote, compassionate, welcoming country after Suella Braverman came under fire for claiming there was an invasion by migrants on England's south coast. I can't help but wonder whether or not Rishi Sunak needs to back his Home Secretary a little bit more. Almost 40,000 migrants have arrived in the UK after crossing the Channel so far this year. Another 46 people arriving in one boat on Monday. Well, Shadow Home Sec Yvette Cooper accused Suella Braverman of ramping up her rhetoric because she had no answers to the problems. That's interesting because we are yet to hear Labour's solution. But the Home Secretary called out the gaslighting that's taking place. We were told that these people were all refugees and asylum seekers, weren't we? And now it emerges that many of them are criminals from Albania. Talking about processing doesn't answer the major question. Where on earth do we put them all? Suella Braverman is facing accusations that she's decided to put refugees in non-Tory voting areas. I don't know if you saw this one from earlier on in the day. The allegation is that Suella Braverman has decided that she wants to plonk a load of these people in essentially Labour or Lib Dem voting seats. Good. If people vote Labour, shouldn't they bear the brunt of Labour's policy? What is Labour's policy, frankly? But here's another big question. Why is it that the latest stats show that the UK accepted, get this, 76% of asylum claims, Spain accepted 11.3%, France 28%, Germany 55.7%, the EU overall apparently just 14%. Have we got Home Office and immigration staff who maybe want an easy life, maybe wave people through? Maybe we are genuinely a really kind and compassionate country. But where's the deterrent? And what do I always say? There's loads to get stuck into with this, ladies and gentlemen, so don't be shy. GBViews at gbnews.uk. We're going to be returning to all of this throughout the show. Let's cross over now for the political side of this with GB News' very own political editor, Darren McCaffrey. He's in Westminster. Darren, thank you very much. What's the latest for us there, then? Is Suella still copping it?
Well, in many regards, I mean, this is an argument that Suella Braverman wants to have. She is very keen to have this argument, particularly the one around the use of the word invasion, a word, it must be said, that the Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, who also sits at the Cabinet table, said he would not have used, and something that when the Prime Minister's spokesperson was asked a little earlier whether he would or not, we didn't get a reply to that answer. But Suella Braverman wants to look tough at immigration. She wants to send out a strong message that she's not prepared to pussyfoot around, if you like, when it comes to the language involved in all of this. But the problem is, has she actually got any solutions? I mean, yesterday she just dumped on every other previous Home Secretary that served as a Conservative since 2010. Theresa May, a failure. Amber Rudd, a failure. Priti Patel, a failure. Has Suella Braverman got the solutions to all of this? Because at one half, the government seemed to be suggesting, Patrick, that this is a Europe-wide problem, which it undoubtedly is. If it's a Europe-wide problem, the UK in itself cannot sort it out, can it? Frankly, that's the whole point. I think the UK is going to have to strike another deal with France. That is almost certain. There is a planned meeting between Suella Braverman and her French counterpart at some stage this autumn. There'll be a hell of a lot more money chucked at it, I would suspect. But in the grand scheme of things, the Labour opposition would point out, and some within government as well, what's holding things back, and you quoted France there, for example, is that it sometimes takes years for Britain to sort out asylum applications. In France, it takes 3 to 4 months, maybe why one of the reasons the numbers in terms of approvals are lower in France, so the absolute number of people seeking asylum is actually higher. So in the end, what I'm trying to say, Patrick, is it's a really complicated issue. There's no doubt about that. There is no real silver bullet to it, and I think the Home Secretary, while wanting to have this fight and wanting to prove tough, it's all really good. The rhetoric, if you do want to tackle this problem, the big thing is, in the end, the proof's in the pudding. Will she be able to say in a year's time, 2 years' time, this issue's been sorted? Because frankly, her predecessors cannot say that, can they?
Darren McCaffrey, thank you very much. Joining me from Westminster, our political editor. Well, also joining me now to discuss the Home Secretary's comments, and I'm very pleased to be able to say this, actually, is former Minister of State for Europe and former, crucially, Labour MP for Rotherham. It's Dr Dennis McShane. Dennis, thank you very much. Thank you for putting your head against the parapet, because we do try very, very often to get a lot of Labour current MPs on. In fact, we tried very hard today, and ominously quiet, really, when it comes to this particular issue. So, Dr Dennis, I've got to ask you now, have you got any idea what Labour's solution to the small boats crossing is, other than open the doors and let them live somewhere?
No, that's just silly, if you'll forgive me. I mean, I went to Albania. I know Albania quite well. I know Greece well. Fascinating thing is, there's about 1 million Albanians half legal, half in the informal market, who worked very happily in Greece, just like they play very happily for Premier League football teams here. They're like you and me. There's some criminals amongst them. The biggest group of criminals have been in Britain the last 20 years were all the Putin oligarchs fiddling their books in London.
Sorry, I just wanted to make... Sorry, Janice, I just wanted to interrupt, just to make sure the question that you understood the question there. I'm wondering how... I'm not questioning about Albanians themselves. I'm talking about how do Labour want to stop the numbers? Because I heard a lot of rhetoric yesterday from Labour about whether or not Suella Braverman's broken the ministerial code. OK, fair question. I didn't hear any solution.
Okay. Well, I would hope they would speed up processing. It drove me and all my generation of MPs mad because we had endless people coming in then from Pakistan and India and East Africa claiming they were coming for family reunion marriages. Some of them were, some of them weren't. But it took a year, 2 years. Files have got fatter and fatter and fatter. I don't know what's wrong with the Home Office and the justice system that they don't throw resources at this. We shipped people home when I was a minister. I remember talking with David Blunkett, arranging transport flights back. I went down to Tirana, and that's where our minister should go. And, it was pretty robust in my language with the Albanians. I would also like everybody in Britain to stop smoking dope and stop snorting cocaine. You want to solve the problem, destroy the consumption. But all our middle classes, our university people, our journalists love sniffing, love smoking. Now, that's in Germany, they're just proposing to decriminalise cannabis use, like in Canada, like in a good number of US states.
OK.
If we did that overnight, you wouldn't need these stupid criminal gangs.
OK, I do understand that. I mean, that is a fair point. If a lot of Albanians and other nationalities are coming over here and we're saying, well, they are coming over here to work in the illegal drug trade, if the illegal drug trade stopped, then yes, that would, cut them off at the knees when it comes to the need for them. But let's be honest, that's not going to happen, right? So we have to kind of ignore that idea. Well, it's not going to happen, Dennis. People aren't going to stop smoking weed and snorting coke. It's not going to happen, right? So how do you feel about... Sorry?
Why don't we decriminalise it?
OK, I understand that. That's a question for another time because I do want to focus on the immigration stuff, but I take your point. Do you feel as though Britain is being invaded on the south coast?
No, I don't. This reminds me so much. So I'm older than Suella, I'm older than you, I expect, Patrick. This is pure language of Enoch Power, 1968. Rivers of blood will flow in Britain because we've been letting too many immigrants in, particularly from East Africa, where Rishi Sunak's and Suella Braverman's parents came from. He set up, and the Tories and other right-wings, not the Tories, trade unions as well, set up repatriation committees and wanted to ensure the Sunaks and the Bravermans were never allowed into England. I'm glad we fought that down, and we've now got, I think, the best multi-hued government of any in the world. I mean, I'm not a Tory, but I'm very proud of the fact we've with other people. Now, what Labour should do is seriously talk to their own people, be aware of this. Invasion, no. The last invaders into the south coast were the anti.
I get that. I do get that, but I think a lot of people are frustrated by the idea that we've been gaslit for a very long time by people who used to sit on your benches, who currently sit on the benches you used to sit on, the Labour Party there, saying all of these people are migrants, all of these people are asylum seekers, all of these people are refugees, and we need to throw our arms around them all, and that's been demonstrably proven not to be the case. And I think some people now are fed up because Dennis, look, if you do look at the definition of invasion, it's not all about war. Some of it is about someone that you don't particularly want coming into your domain, unwanted, right? And that kind of is what's happening, right? So, and the question is, Dennis, where do we put them all? Where do we put them all?
Well, where they were put, when they were all coming here in the late 1990s, and particularly after the Iraq War, then Cameron's intervention in Syria and Libya, destabilising those countries, millions coming through. Nigel Farage used it in the famous Breaking Point post. Do you remember the snake going through the Balkans? That's because we went into those countries and completely messed them up and still do. Where we put them all? They were put in cheap hotels, usual. Yeah, they were actually often in cities, but in working class areas. That's just where the cheap hotels were. They're not going to be put up in the Dorset or the Ritz, are they?
Well, no, but this is it. We are running out of space, Dennis. This is the problem. But Dr. Dennis McShane, thank you very much. I do appreciate you coming on. Former Labour MP for Rotherham and former Minister of State for Europe. Loads to discuss on this very issue. What do you make, ladies and gentlemen, of the fact as well that we are accepting something 76% of asylum claims when you compare that across Europe? Spain, for example, 11.3%, France 28%, Germany 55.7%. Why do you think that is? Where do we put them all as well is another serious question. And the big one that's kicking off in my inbox, I'm going to go to your views very shortly, gbviews@gbnews.uk, is do you actually think that Britain is being invaded? So far, a lot of you do. This is GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. The Treasury has also warned that households may have to pay more tax to put the UK's public finances on a sustainable footing. Could we all be paying more into the public purse? We're going to have to, aren't we? Left, right and centre. Good grief. Back in a moment.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
Oh, I'm so sorry. A very good afternoon to you. It is 3:30. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. Let's give you the news then. Counter-terrorism police are leading the investigation into the petrol bombing of a Dover immigration centre on Sunday. Kent police have described the incident as targeted and likely to be driven by some form of hate-filled grievance. The suspect, named as 66-year-old Andrew Leake, was found dead at a nearby service station. The former Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, has had the Tory whip suspended with immediate effect after signing up to the reality TV show I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. The Sun are reporting he's been confirmed as the 12th star to enter the Australian jungle. He resigned from Cabinet in June last year after breaching guidance on social distancing. The Home Secretary says large numbers of people are now being relocated from the Manston migrant processing facility in Kent. Suella Braverman told Cabinet they're being moved to relieve pressure caused by an unprecedented number of channel crossings. Around 4,000 people are thought to be at the centre, which is built to hold a maximum of 1,600 individuals. Police are searching a waste recycling plant in Leeds after human remains were found. Forensic officers are currently assessing the remains at Skelton Skips after receiving a report yesterday morning. Now, as we find out more information, we'll keep you up to date here. Just Stop Oil protesters have tried to climb and lock themselves to the gates at Downing Street. The demonstrators also tried to block Whitehall, some sitting on the road, while others glued themselves to the tarmac. They want the government to halt all new oil and gas licences. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Patrick will be back in a moment.
Well, welcome back, everybody. Patrick Christys here on GB News Live. Loads of you getting in touch about this idea that maybe we are indeed being invaded. As Suella Braverman said, I'll go to your email shortly. But first, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Chancellor Jeremy Hunt are expected to raise taxes for everyone in the country. Let that sink in a bid to bring down national debt. According to reports, there's a, quote, black hole in public finances estimated at around 50 billion quid, raising fresh concerns on how the government plans to fill it. And there's growing pressures to raise more money through a windfall tax on energy firms after oil giant BP earlier reported record rises in global profits. Let's turn now to our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, with On the Money. OK, Liam Halligan, are we all going to be skint?
Well, I certainly think the Treasury is engaged in a softening up exercise, Patrick, briefing to the papers that this autumn statement on the 17th of November is going to be, quotes, painful, with, quotes, across-the-board tax rises. Here's Her Majesty's Daily Express.
Yes.
Dire warning, higher tax on way to plug debt.
Right.
There is, of course, a problem with the public finances. The economy is slowing down. The government is paying lots of money in debt interest, but it's paying a lot less, or it will pay a lot less than it was just a few weeks ago, because those borrowing costs have come down with the change of Prime Minister. I think what I'd say is there's now, while the Treasury is briefing this as a statement of intent, I'd say there's a philosophical debate going, and that's a friendly word. It's a pretty full contact debate going on within Parliament. A lot of Conservative MPs don't like the fact that with the tax burden already at a 70-year high, that's the share of our GDP that's taken by tax, it's about 36%. Now Rishi Sunak, who calls himself a Thatcherite, is going to increase the tax burden even more. And this is at a time, Patrick, when consumer confidence is at a record low, and also manufacturing. I've got some numbers here on manufacturing. Now, a lot of people deride manufacturing. They say we're not as good as we were. We're still the 9th biggest manufacturer in Britain, right? And our manufacturing sector still employs a fifth of our workforce. This graphic shows the UK Manufacturing Index. This is a survey of business leaders across manufacturing. In June 2022, 52.8 of them said they think their economy is expanding. Their business is expanding. So that's why I've put green there.
Right.
In September, that went below 50% to 48.4%. That means business leaders across manufacturing think that their businesses are getting smaller, but it's plunged to 46.2% in October. That's one of the lowest figures on record. The last time that manufacturing index, it's called the SIPS index, was that low, Patrick, was slap in the middle of lockdown in the summer of 2020. So that's where our manufacturing sector is. Do we really want to hit these guys with higher corporation tax?
No.
Do we really want to hit people who are struggling to make ends meet with higher mortgage costs, higher energy costs, higher food costs, with yet more tax?
No, absolutely not. No. I was joining in the chorus there, but that's how angry I am about all of this, because, all right, I get that the Liz Truss stuff was maybe too much too soon. The comms are absolutely shocking. But now, if it's this kind of high-tax society that we live in, well, firstly, it's not very conservative at all, is it? And some people would say, well, if we're paying for what's been going on in the Channel as well and all of this stuff, we're paying for potential public sector pay rises and we're paying for higher energy costs and all this stuff, where's all this money coming from? We can't just bleed the British population dry, can we?
I worry about business. I guess that's sort of my job to talk about how business feels. I'm the economics and business editor, funnily enough. But I still think the business class, the political class, doesn't really understand business and what business needs. Now, the vast majority of business folk in this country, they're not sitting in a big skyscraper in the city of London. They're not, hedge fund managers like Rishi Sunak used to be. They're running small and medium-sized enterprises, so-called SMEs, Patrick. These are the companies, in my view, which we should be championing here on GB News. They account for 2/3 of our employment. They account for half of all growth, a massive share of our innovation. These are the people who keep Britain moving. They are being slammed they were slammed during lockdown. The corner shops had to shut down while the big supermarkets could stay open.
Yeah.
And they're now being hit with an increase in corporation tax from 19 to 25%. When you are struggling to keep the doors of a business open, to take 6% off your margin could wipe out the whole point of being in business. And I don't really think that the Treasury gets that.
No, I agree with you, and it sucks out entrepreneurial spirit, which I think actually the Brits are some of the best people out in the world, and if that isn't there, that's a massive problem. Liam Halligan, thank you very much. That was indeed on the money. What do you make of that, ladies and gentlemen? Loads of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts, though, on Suella Braverman's invasion comment. And Mark says, GBviews at gbnews.uk, by the way. Keep these coming in, ladies and gentlemen. It has absolutely popped off today. Whether they are genuine or not, the method of entry is illegal, therefore they shouldn't be welcomed. That's from Mark. Jan says, in my opinion, Suella is the only MP who has any guts to tackle this serious problem. I can't help but agree with you, Jan, actually. And I must say, I was hoping for a little bit more of a backing from Rishi Sunak yesterday. What I don't think a lot of people can get their heads around, what I don't think a lot of people on the other side of the chamber can get their heads around, is that Suella Braverman, firstly an ethnic minority herself, comes and stands up in Parliament and uses a turn of phrase that you will hear down the pub, that you will hear if you speak to most people, normal people, walking up and down the streets, especially in working class areas, especially up in the north of England. She said that the south coast of England was being invaded. And I don't think they can handle that because they're too busy trying to talk about the idea that maybe she broke the ministerial code. Well, she did break the ministerial code. They're too busy now trying to talk about this rhetoric as opposed to sorting out the actual problem. And that is much more difficult to do. What is Labour's plan when it comes to all of this? Michelle has been on. Michelle says, so Braverman has moved migrants from Manston because it's overcrowded. To where? Where can we fit them? We really need to tackle the problematic source. This is another cracking point. I think that was Michelle. Yes, it was. These are the questions that need to be answered, not focusing in directly in a negative sense on what Suella Braverman has said, because this is the big question. Where do we put all of these people? And it's not going away anytime soon, is it? It's all very well and good saying we need to speed up our application process. Can I just hit you quickly with a couple more of these figures, which is that our asylum acceptance processes, 76% accepted in this country. Now, yes, that can take a very long time. Could it be that we want to do a more thorough job? Well, it doesn't look like it if we're accepting 76% of them, does it? Spain only accepts 11.3%, France 28%, Germany 55.7%. Apparently, the EU overall just 14%. But even if we sped that up, we've got no deterrent because the Rwanda flights are being banned from being taken off, as it would appear as well. And, of course, the rhetoric around all of this. We've got to be all kind and welcoming and accepting that despite the fact that now more evidence than ever is emerging that several of these people, many of these people, are indeed from Albania and have the intention of coming and working in our illegal industries, we have to have this bizarre gaslighting ideology that they're all welcomed here as refugees and asylum seekers. And where on earth do we put them? Because it's headed one place and one place only, and that is tent cities in local parks. Because where else? Coming up, there's been travel advice and guidance for fans heading to the World Cup in Qatar. But is it safe for people in the UK to make the journey for the hugely popular sporting event starting in less than a month? I'll also be speaking to a former politician. I love this story. A former politician who's experienced life in the Australian jungle, to ask him whether a serving member of parliament should spend almost a month with snakes and spiders instead of serving their constituency. I think it's ambitious to say that Matt Hancock will survive that long. Matt Hancock is going to be going into the jungle, ladies and gentlemen. He's lost the Tory party whip. Hey, look, there's Bush Tucker trials. Some people think he should be facing another kind of trial. I, for one, cannot wait to see him eat a kangaroo's testicle. I'll be back in 2.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio.
And online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case. Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Welcome back, everybody. Patrick Christys here on GB News Live. Now, the Qatar World Cup is under 3 weeks away, kicking off on the 20th of November with the opening game of Qatar versus Ecuador. Big game, big game. It is certainly going to be a unique World Cup, not only for the time of year that it's taking place, but also with serious question marks over the freedom of fans and the country's human rights record. Our national correspondent, Paul Hawkins, has been at a media briefing at the Foreign Office for us and joins us now. Paul, thank you very much. What's the latest, please?
Look, to be honest, we've had a briefing here at the Foreign Office from the Foreign Office officials themselves, also the head of the British policing operation that's been liaising with the Qatari authorities, the Welsh FA, the English FA were also here, various organisations representing Welsh and English football fans. And to put this into perspective, Qatar is a tiny country in the Middle East. It's about the size of Jamaica or Montenegro. It has absolutely zero experience of hosting huge events like the World Cup. Yes, it's hosted things like the World Club Championship. It has hosted big football matches, one-off football matches, but nothing on the scale of one of the world's biggest sports tournaments, which when it kicks off on November the 20th, effectively will also become a huge news event in itself, because it's the first World Cup in the Middle East. It's the first Islamic World Cup, and there are about 2.8 million people in Qatar. Most of them live in Doha, the capital. About 80% of them are expats. When you shove in an extra 1.2 to 1.5 million people from across the world, that is a huge logistical operation for the Qatari authorities to handle. So the Qatari police have recruited Pakistani police to work in the stadiums as kind of, think of them like private security guards, and then you've got the Turkish police who have been drafted in to help out the Qatari police. Now, this is what Mark Roberts, who's leading the British Policing Authority, told me about that hiring of foreign police by the Qatari authorities earlier.
I think it's going to be a significant contingent. My understanding is the Pakistani police will act as, in effect, the private security and stewards at venues. The Turkish police are going to be there in terms of public order support together with other countries. So I think there'll be some quite significant deployments. So one of the things that we're really keen on is, with a number of different police forces being involved, that we link with them, speak police to police, and try and be that conduit between them and our supporters.
So, tiny country, very conservative, quite strict Islamic laws in terms of the fans having a drink. They will only be able to drink in hotel bars and in fan zones. The message from the Foreign Office, from the police, from the authorities here, and they've been liaising over there, so the authorities over there have an idea of what to expect with football fans, is listen to the advice that we're giving you, be respectful, only drink in the designated areas. When you move out of the designated areas late at night, don't go wandering around the streets waving your shirt in the air, chanting football football chants at 1 o'clock in the morning. Be respectful of the authorities, and that's the biggest fear from that chap that we just heard from, who's leading the British Policing Authority, British Policing operation. He's worried about whether fans will listen and about the cultural clash between what normally happens in Qatar and what happens in the Western world, in European football, in European countries, and over here in Britain. So it all kicks off on November the 20th. England play their first game against Iran on November the 21st. On the same day, Wales play the USA. It's going to definitely be a different World Cup from the ones that have gone before.
Paul, thank you very much. Paul Hawkins there, our national reporter, bringing you the very latest on what's been announced when it comes to the Qatar World Cup. But also joining me now to discuss whether or not fans should go is David Haig. Now, he's an international human rights lawyer. Also, used to be very, very high up when it came to Leeds United Football Club. And, as we were going to talk about, has had some rather unfortunate, to say the least, personal experience of what it's like to fall foul of the law, wrongly, in that part of the world. David, thank you very much. Difficult to know exactly where to start with you when it comes to this one. In terms of fans going over there, I mean, I'm not sure many of our viewers will be reassured to know that the Pakistani police and the Turkish police are going to be there to help mediate between us and the Qatari state. This is a recipe for disaster, isn't it?
I mean, not wanting to quote Boris Johnson ever, but I think inverted pyramid of piffle coming from the Foreign Office is probably quite a good quote. I mean, I was even just now, after what your correspondent said, looking at the Foreign Office's own advice to British nationals going abroad on their website that very clearly says, find out the local laws and follow them. And when you look at LGBT rights there, the local laws are that it's illegal. So if we're going by the Foreign Office's own advice on their website, it says don't go, yet they're now saying maybe you can go. So it's a complete, absolute mess. Now, the Foreign Office needs to give clear and concise advice to people that travel in any country, anywhere, as British people, to protect the British people. That's not being done. So it's very unclear whether it's safe to go, is it not safe to go? It's absurd.
Well, it seems to me, in a way, it's bizarrely straightforward, David. If you are a gay man, then you just have to stop being gay when you get off the plane over there. And if you are a beer-swilling football fan, just stop swilling beer and enjoying football when you're out there as well. It is absolutely ludicrous to have any kind of major tournament in a country like Qatar. And when people fall foul of these rules, which they will, because you don't have to do very much to fall foul of rules in a place like that, you have a rather unique experience on exactly what can happen to you, David, don't you, when you end up the wrong side of the law in countries similar to that. Would you mind enlightening some of our listeners and our viewers, please?
Sure. I mean, when I was managing director of Leeds United, I fell out with the owners. It's quite well known, about 8-9 years ago now, and they effectively tricked me to come to Dubai, used the very corrupt system there as something of a corporate jail for extreme litigation tactics, locked me up. I was there for 22 months, 9 months of which was so-called Twitter abuse, and experienced some extremely very bad things, from torture to sexual abuse, and also something that I now know happens to everyone. The Foreign Office, which is obviously very important when it comes to all the Brits now going to the Qatar World Cup, the Foreign Office being clearly not fit for purpose. And that was, just in my case and a few cases in the Middle East of Brits that are abroad. Now, you've got countless Brits now going to the Middle East, not just Qatar, but also because they don't have enough hotels, etc. People are going to go and staying in Bahrain, they're staying in Dubai. So you've got a lot of Brits going all across that region, in a region that is known to have considerable corruption and human rights abuses in the jails and the justice system. It's a recipe for disaster. Now, the thing with that, though, is that a lot of people, and not wanting to defend Qatar, but a lot of people are blaming the Qataris. But the people that really need to be blamed are the people that gave Qatar the World Cup in the first place, which is FIFA.
Exactly that. The winner here were several people's back pockets. And that's the reality of the situation, OK? We all remember seeing that, don't we? The first World Cup, I believe, was Russia, wasn't it? And then there was Qatar. And you just thought, good grief. The look on Prince William's face when that was announced said it all. And I think it's pretty blatantly obvious that corruption has won the day there when it comes to some of these World Cups. Look, I can't help but ask you this one, David. Do you think football fans should just boycott this World Cup? Dare I say it? Should some members of, not just England's football team, maybe boycott it? Because I can understand it could be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for any footballers to go and play at a World Cup. You're a bad knee injury away from never playing again. So I can understand that. But the likes of Gary Neville and Gary Lineker going and taking the dollar for essentially propping up and helping to sports wash a place that is just a cesspit of human rights abuses against the very people that the likes of Gary Lineker normally try to say that they actually care about, like the LGBTQ plus community, for example. I mean, should they be staying away?
Well, I think it's a very interesting question, but I think when we look at that, I mean, if people boycott the World Cup, that's one thing. But the reality is it's not just the World Cup. When the World Cup finishes, you still have Newcastle owned effectively by the Saudi ruler and controlled by the Saudi ruler, who's allegedly, killed a journalist, Jamal Khashoggi. You still have Man City owned by others in the Middle East. You still have sports washing all across the sports industry, whether it's golf, whether it's advertising, whether it's football, whether it's horse racing. So once the World Cup's finished, and moved on, then we still have the problem. So I think it's a bigger picture. I mean, boycotting is one thing, but what next? We need to make sure that sports washing in this doesn't continue to happen in the long term, as opposed to just the World Cup. I mean, that's my view.
Look, David, thank you very, very much. It's always an absolute pleasure to have your quite unique insight, really, when it comes to this, on all of the different aspects of this Qatari World Cup. You've found out the hard way, very unfortunately, and thank you for being brave enough to share that with the public, by the way, about law and order, lack of, I suppose, in those countries, about corruption. You've got a unique footballing perspective as well, former MD of Leeds United and a human rights lawyer as well. I'm very, very, very grateful to have someone of your stature and insight on this programme. Thank you very much, David Haig there.
Pleasure.
Joining us. Right, a little bit of breaking news, ladies and gentlemen. I usually say when the big news happens, it happens right here on GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys, and today is no different because within the last few moments, Just Stop Oil, that's right, have announced that after a month of protests against fossil fuels, their activists will pause the group's campaign of what they call civil resistance. Good grief, we can all breathe a sigh of relief, although I'm pretty sure we just reported on some of them trying to chain themselves to Downing Street. But anyway, in a tweet, the group said, "We are giving time to those in government who are in touch with reality to consider their responsibilities to this country at this time." Well, there we go. I'm not being funny, but isn't this a little bit like, when you're a child and you say to your parents, "I'm going to move out, I'm going to leave home, I'm going to run away from home if you don't stop doing this," and your parents go, "Oh, OK then, all right, fine," they let you walk a little bit outside the front door because actually you're not going to go anywhere. It does seem a little bit like this now, doesn't it? So Just Stop Oil are doing us all the courtesy to give ourselves a moment of reflection when it comes to their cause and accept what they call as reality. So there we are. How do you feel about that, ladies and gentlemen? Just Stop Oil apparently have now just stopped for a little while. GB Views at gbnews.uk. There is loads for you to get in touch with as well today. And one of the stories, and I am all over this like a rash, is the former Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, who has had the Tory whip removed from him after joining this year's cast of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. Fantastic. The Tory chief whip said that it was serious enough to warrant suspension, that he'd taken the decision after speaking to the MP for West Suffolk. It's been met with criticism by the Tory campaign group COVID-19 Bereaved Families for Justice, and rightly so, in my opinion. It called the decision sickening and called for ITV to remove him from the programme. Well, joining me now is a man who appeared on I'm a Celeb, the former Lib Dem MP, Lembit Opik. Lembit, thank you very, very much. I don't know about you, but I don't think that Matt Hancock should be in there for a variety of different reasons. The taxpayer pays his wages just generally as an MP. I do think he made serious, catastrophic mistakes that potentially some would argue may have cost lives during the coronavirus pandemic. But all of that said, I am looking forward to him eating a kangaroo's penis.
Well, OK, that's maybe your personal preference for after the watershed. As far as I'm concerned, I do want him to be in there. I think he's got the right. I think he's pretty crazy if he thinks he can get his side of the story over. Has he ever seen the show? It's not edited to make you look good. It's crash and burn TV. That's why we turn on. What I do find objectionable, I have to tell you, is the idea that he gets suspended. What is going on in the Tory party? Don't they realise that more people watch I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here than watch PMQs? And why didn't they suspend Nadine Dorries when she was in there? As far as I'm concerned, maybe Matt Hancock isn't making the smartest decision if he thinks he can control his media. He's actually signed that over to ITV now. But I do think he's completely entitled to be in there. It's between him and his constituents, not between him and the whip.
No, but he's not got the best track record when it comes to remembering where the cameras are, does he, Lambert? And I think there's a concern that maybe he'll forget and we'll see the real Matt Hancock, and perhaps that's why the Tory party have suspended him. They actually really think he will crash and burn, and they don't want to be associated with the guy.
Well, that's very pessimistic. You were talking about how kids behave earlier on, about Just Stop Oil. It's almost like you're being the dark father here, saying, oh, well, we've got to stop him from embarrassing the rest of the family. Actually, if Matt Hancock does well there, and I don't know if he will, then he could actually do himself quite a lot of good. If he does badly, it's not really going to reflect on the Tory party. No one's going to say, well, I'm not going to vote for you in Skelmersdale because Matt Hancock didn't eat a witchery grub in Australia.
I'm going to have to be very quick here, Lembit, I'm afraid, but there are people who feel as though that Matt Hancock's decision-making cost lives, people who lost relatives in care homes, people who feel maybe that the vaccine was forced on them, etc. Do you think it's in poor taste to have this bloke who, let's be honest, left in disgrace anyway, to go in and maybe be given the chance to rise like a phoenix from the coronavirus ashes?
Well, if he does, that means that people have forgiven him and they take a different view of him. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If he does badly, then people say he's just as bad as we thought. If he does well, then people say differently. At the end of the day, I actually trust the public. I understand people can be offended and there's an awful lot of tragedy involved in what he did and the decisions he made. But he isn't actually a killer. He's a human being, and just because he's got a past doesn't mean he can't have a future.
Lembit, thank you very much, as ever, former Lib Dem MP and indeed contestant on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, Lembit Opik, just reacting to that news that Matt Hancock is not just joining I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, he's lost the Tory whip as a result of it. He was aired, wasn't he? He was blanked by Rishi Sunak as Rishi decided that he was going to walk into CCHQ on the day that he became Prime Minister. Is this curtains now for Matt Hancock? Does he know what he's getting himself involved with? I absolutely cannot wait for him to sit every single Bush Tucker trial going. I imagine that the phone lines are going to be hot for him to do just unspeakable things involving bodily parts from bush animals. Anyway, coming up in the next hour, we will be revisiting Suella Braverman's rhetoric on Channel migrants, asking whether or not you think that we are being invaded, whether or not you think this is just a distraction from the big issue, which is like, where do we put these people? And frankly, how on earth are we going to afford it? But all of that is coming your way very shortly. This is Patrick Christys. This is GB News Live. I will be back in a tick.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
Welcome back, everybody. This is GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys, on your TV, radio and online, all the way through until 6. So within the last hour, a little bit of breaking news. It's been announced from Kent Police that counter-terror police are now leading the investigation into the firebombing of a Dover immigration centre on Sunday. The suspect has been named as 66-year-old Andrew Leake. The news comes as the Home Secretary is under pressure for her strong words on the migration crisis, but I frankly think that this is a distraction, people pretending to be annoyed by her rhetoric as opposed to actually confronting the real issue that's going on in the Channel. Is our South Coast being invaded, more to the point? Was she actually right to say that? Is Britain being invaded? Suella Braverman is taking flack for her use of language, but is she just saying what most people are thinking? And frankly, is she one of the few people in the Houses of Parliament to have the guts to do it? Suella Braverman made the comments as she gave a statement to the House of Commons about overcrowding at the Manston Immigration Processing Centre in Kent. Yes, I've said it. Fake outrage is the distraction from the big question. Where on earth do we put all of these people? Because over 10,000 of the 40,000 or so who've crossed the Channel this year are from Albania. This is why Suella called out the gaslighting from across the House. We have to stop pretending that everyone coming across the Channel is a refugee, because they are not. That's what she said, and the facts are with her. We have a GB News exclusive on how some of those people are starting criminal gangs. They're being pushed, apparently, across the Channel by these human traffickers. Official sources have told us that many are being used by the gangs to take control over Britain's cannabis trade. And this is a story that I am absolutely all over. Not just what's going on in the Channel, no, but we're sending someone, apparently, the other way. We're actually deporting somebody. It's Matt Hancock, and he's going into Australia's I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of It. I'd like to see him face another kind of trial. I'm sure many people would as well, but I'll have to settle for him, I don't know, throwing up all over a witchetty grub or drinking some horrible concoction of camel genitalia. Anyway, will you be voting for him? I'm sure lots of people will be voting to keep him there for as long as physically possible. But before that, to all your latest headlines.
Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon to you. And as you've been hearing, the top story on GB News today is that the Home Secretary says large numbers of people are now being relocated from the Manston Migrant Processing Centre in Kent. Suella Braverman told a meeting of Cabinet Ministers today that they're being moved to other accommodation to relieve pressure caused by an unprecedented number of Channel crossings. Around 4,000 people are thought to be at the centre, which was originally built to house a maximum of 1,600. Conservative MPs, including Andrew Bridgen, have been defending the Home Secretary after she described the influx of migrants as an invasion yesterday.
I think Suella Braverman is the best chance we've got of halting this. And she's getting a lot of pushback from the left because they know that she's serious about dealing with it. And quite honestly, if the Conservative government can't come up with a solution in the next 18 months, I think it's going to be very difficult for us at the next general election. Indeed, we've got local elections next May.
Meanwhile, counter-terrorism police are now leading the investigation into the petrol bombing of a Dover immigration centre on Sunday. Kent Police have described the incident as targeted and likely to have been driven by some form of hate-filled grievance. However, the force says it may not necessarily meet the threshold of terrorism. The suspect has been named as 66-year-old Andrew Leake. He was later found dead at a nearby service station. The former Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, has had the Conservative whip suspended with immediate effect after signing up to go on a reality TV show. He's set to appear on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, with the Sun newspaper saying he's been confirmed as the 12th star to enter the Australian jungle. He resigned from Cabinet in June last year after breaching guidance on social distancing. The TV series starts this Sunday, but Mr Hancock is expected to be one of 2 latecomers to join the camp. Ambulance staff in Scotland have voted overwhelmingly to strike over pay. 8,000 members of the GMB Scotland Union working for the Scottish Ambulance Service and Greater Glasgow and Clyde Health Board were balloted. It means nearly 4,000 staff, including paramedics, nurses and radiographers, could walk out. The union is urging the Scottish Government to bring forward a significantly improved pay offer to avoid industrial action over the winter. And as you were just hearing from Patrick, Just Stop Oil, the campaign group, say they're pausing protests to give the government time to consider their responsibilities to the country. It comes after the climate activists tried to climb and lock themselves to the gates at Downing Street. Demonstrators also tried to block Whitehall, some sitting on the road, while others glued themselves to the tarmac. They want the government to halt all new oil and gas licensing. Now, Sinn Féin's Stormont leader says the party's none the wiser on whether there'll be an election after holding talks with the Northern Ireland Secretary. Michelle O'Neill says Chris Heaton-Harris offered no clarity on how he plans to deal with the ongoing uncertainty at Stormont, and she accused him of making a bizarre U-turn by failing to call a vote last Friday. Speaking after their meeting, she said the public is being continually left in limbo.
I'm none the wiser today in terms of his next step. He didn't make that very clear. As I said, he didn't colour in the lines. He didn't say what his next move was. But, you know, you can't escape the reality that there's an obligation on him, a legal obligation on him to call the election. Instead, he's created a political vacuum.
Well, Democratic Unionist Party leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson says he too is in the dark, but is prepared if there's a vote.
If an election is called, we are ready to fight that election. We're putting our candidates in place. We've our literature agreed. We're getting our campaign arrangements finalised. So if an election is called, we'll be there. We'll take our case to the people. We will seek to renew and indeed to strengthen our mandate.
And just lastly, some news. We're receiving some word on that police are searching a waste recycling plant, we understand, in Leeds, after human remains were found there. Forensic officers are currently on site assessing the remains at Skelton Skips after receiving a tip-off yesterday morning. We'll keep you updated on that story as we find out more. For the moment, you're up to date on GB News. More news as it happens. Now back to Patrick.
Strap yourselves in, people, because we've got a whirlwind coming your way. This afternoon, Kent Police have confirmed that counter-terrorism police are now leading the investigation into the firebombing of a Dover immigration centre on Sunday. The suspect has been named as 66-year-old Andrew Leake from High Wycombe in Buckinghamshire. So that's the latest when it comes to that. But the news comes amid this particular backdrop because the immigration minister has warned against demonising people seeking to come to the UK. This is after Home Secretary Suella Braverman said England now faces an invasion of migrants on the south coast. I don't know about you, but doesn't it not seem like Suella Braverman might be being hung out to dry a little bit here? Not a huge amount of support from Rishi Sunak, not a huge amount of support from the immigration minister. Why? She's simply saying what many people are thinking, isn't she? In the Commons, she promised to fix the UK's broken asylum system as she rejected calls to resign over her response to the migrant crisis and, indeed, being a bit squiffy over the ministerial code. Joining me now, live, to discuss this topic is former member of the European Parliament. It's Rupert Lowe. Rupert, thank you very much. Is Britain being invaded?
Well, I must say I agree with Suella Braverman. I think the level of noise that we're seeing from the woke left just shows that she's actually hit the mark. It's time the British people were put at the top of the agenda. I personally don't think a lot of these people are genuine asylum seekers. As you've been reporting, they're basically Albanian criminals, a lot of them, and they're coming here illegally. So I think it's important we have somebody who's intelligent, who believes in what they're doing, and I think Suella Braverman, in the comments that she's made recently, is spot on. So I'm fully behind her.
We are running out of room Rupert, we have seen hotels commandeered in their entirety. We are now hearing about hotel rooms individually being commandeered. We are hearing of social housing being used, private rental housing being used, detention centres overflowing. We are heading towards tent cities, are we not?
Well, as I say, I think it's important we put the British taxpayer at the top of the agenda. That's what the government's elected to do. And as you know, in my old constituency in the West Midlands, there were a lot of hotels that were suddenly filled up with so-called asylum seekers who are actually illegal immigrants. And, you know, Australia has shown us the way. They basically do take this very seriously. They have a zero-tolerance policy. Anyone who comes into Australia illegally is basically taken to various processing centres offshore Australia. And they are not thereafter allowed to enter Australia legally. Now, I'm all in favour of legal immigration, but people have to go through the right channels. And at the end of the day, these people coming in who are, as we read, now running various, drug rings and other criminal activities in the UK are damaging the interests of everybody who lives here.
Let me just read to you, Rupert, the definition of invasion. OK, now the initial definition is an instance of invading a country or region with an armed force. That may well not apply, really, although we are hearing of some of these people apparently being armed. An incursion by a large number of people or things into a place or sphere of activity. Check. An unwelcome intrusion into another's domain. Well, many people think that that's what's exactly going on here. So it's pretty clear when people like to wheel out the dictionary definition of invasion, they're focusing on the initial one, which is stoking up kind of some military tensions. But actually, if they just read a little bit further down the line, they see that what Suella Braverman is saying, I think a lot of people would argue, fits the bill. And I can't help but wonder, when you see people like Yvette Cooper getting so wound up about it now, is it convenient for her to start talking about the use of language as opposed to talking about the fact that actually Labour, as far as I can see, has no policy to stop the boats coming across, has no policy for deportations, and it really has no policy on where on earth we're going to put these people, apart from making their lives more comfortable?
Well, spot on. And you know, people like Yvette Cooper, who is soundly unsound, she's got a history of basically being soft on migrants of any kind. So I mean, Labour are just not to be trusted on this subject. I think most of the British establishment aren't to be trusted, particularly the civil service. The BBC, as you know, I'm a keen proponent of defunding the BBC, which I think is a woke monopoly now. It no longer informs, educates and entertains with complete independent, with a completely independent view rather than a balanced view, which is what Reith wanted. It basically, with impartiality is the word I'm looking for. At the end of the day, the organs of this woke Britain that we've got they've gone into overdrive on Suella Braverman. I think Rishi Sunak now has got to show us that he is strong. He believes in the person he's appointed. He needs to throw his weight fully behind her, support what she's doing and solve the problem. If they don't, then I think the Tories are going to lose an awful lot of votes at the next election.
You know what? I actually felt quite sorry, Rupert, yesterday for Suella Braverman. She stood there, apparently quite isolated, as, from what I could see, a one-woman defence against a woke group of people who are asking us to suspend reality and logic. They've done it already when it comes to gender, and they're doing it now when it comes to this idea of, oh, we're keeping them in terrible conditions. How on earth do you expect a detention centre that was only ever supposed to be equipped for 1,500 people to cope with the fact that 1,500 people arrived in one day over the weekend, 40,000 so far this year? They were saying she hasn't commandeered enough hotels. How does the British taxpayer think about that? I thought that Suella Braverman actually did quite a good job yesterday, and if she wants to call it an invasion, she is perfectly well within her rights to call it that, given that actually the definition of invasion would arguably back her up. Can I just say thank you very much, Rupert Lowe there, who is a former member of the European Parliament. But this afternoon, a union representing Border Force workers at the overcrowded immigration centre in Kent says the Home Office hope to move 400 people out of that site by the end of today. Almost 40,000 migrants have arrived in the UK after crossing the Channel so far this year, with another 46 people arriving in one boat on Monday. Such large numbers What can the government do to house them? And this is the thing, we're all here, sitting here talking about an invasion. Is it an invasion? Is it not an invasion? The fact is, it doesn't really matter what it is. The big question, I would argue, is where on earth we put some of these people. And joining me now is Madeleine Sumption, who's Director of the Migration Observatory. Madeleine, thank you very much. Please, please, please clear this up for me, because from where I'm sitting, and I speak to people all the time about this issue, the lower end of private rental stock is being gobbled up by the Home Office, social housing gobbled up by the Home Office, hotels gobbled up by the Home Office. Where do we put these people?
So I mean, there's been a lot of focus on hotels, and rightly so, because hotels are quite expensive and aren't always the appropriate accommodation for some of these people anyway. I think the key problem that we have, hotels have always been a contingency that was used when, in periods of peak demand, and for the most part, people lived in relatively low quality private accommodation. Now, the core problem behind all of the pressure that we're seeing at the moment, you have these short-term issues when a large number of people arrive on a particular day, but the real problem in the background of all of this is that we have a really big backlog of asylum applications that haven't been processed.
That up for me. Sorry, just talk me through that, because I'm keen to drill down on that, because unfortunately the issue is not when sporadically these people arrive in large numbers. They're now arriving in large numbers every single day. OK, so that is now just the issue. It's not an occasional problem. And what I don't understand, Madeleine, is if we sped up the asylum acceptance process, we currently accept something like 78% of them anyway, which is much higher than, say, Spain, which apparently only accepts 11.9%. It still is the question of where on earth we put these people.
Well, so part of the particular issue that the Home Office faces now is that while people are waiting for their application, they're not allowed to work, and so they would otherwise be destitute, and they have to be put in some kind of accommodation. Now, if you made those decisions faster and didn't have such a large backlog of people, over 100,000 applications at the moment, 100,000 people, you would then people would then be able to go. They would either be rejected and liable for removal, or they would be accepted and have status in the UK, and then they would go and find accommodation in the way that other members of the population do. So it would.
Is it not difficult at the moment, because we're now facing an increasing number of Albanian, largely men, who are coming over? Reports suggest that 2% of the male population of Albania is already here. We are hearing increasing reports of them coming here with the express intention of entering the criminal underworld. We know for a fact that a lot of these people, whether or not they're Albanian or otherwise, are ditching documents in the channel and making it very difficult for us to tell who they are, even what age they are. So isn't it reasonable to expect that there's a backlog? Because I wouldn't want to live in a country where we rushed these things through. Do we not, rather unfortunately, now have to start from a standpoint of assuming that some of these people might be on the take, as opposed to assuming that they are actually genuine refugees or asylum seekers?
Yeah, on the time it takes, I think there's a tricky balance here, because, as you say, you don't want to rush it through and sort of make a decision overnight. These are really complicated cases. At the same time, so you can't necessarily make a decision in a few days. That said, taking many of the applications now are taking a year, sometimes 2 years, even 3 years, which isn't really good for anyone. In terms of the question about whether people should be assumed to have claims for, genuine claims for asylum or not. What's interesting, I think, is that over the last few years, we've actually seen a majority of all asylum claims being, a majority of all decisions on asylum applications have been positive. So the Home Office is determining that these are people who are in need of protection. Now, we don't know specifically for these cohorts of people who've been moving over the last few weeks, whether that will be the case for them. But certainly, based on the stats in the past, it does look like many of the people, particularly those from Iran or from Syria, or
can I ask on that?
Will get protection.
Just quickly on that, and you might be uniquely placed to answer this for me. A lot of people are concerned that that's because maybe people at the Home Office are overworked and they might be waving some of them through. Not sure about that, but that's just a concern that people have. But people also have a concern that at the moment, if I was an Albanian warlord, I could maybe get in a dinghy, come over here, say that I was gay and was going to be persecuted in my own country, leaving behind a wife and kids, and there's very little that people can do about that, and I get accepted. Is there massive, massive loopholes in the law here, which mean that we are having to accept people. And so these figures can be manipulated, or we judge that 80-odd% of them or whatever are genuine asylum seekers and refugees. But the reasons behind that might not be genuine themselves.
There are exceptions in refugee law for people who have serious criminal backgrounds, so the UK wouldn't necessarily be obliged to accept people with those problematic pasts. But I think for the most part, these are sort of people. I think it's around 16% in the most recent year of data of asylum seekers were from Albania. We actually, we have people coming from large numbers of different countries across the world, and all of the circumstances they face will be different.
Yeah, well, just my concern is that if you just say you're gay or from a particularly persecuted group, it may or may not be true. I mean, how do you prove if someone's gay? You can't really do that, can you?
Asylum applications are challenging, and I think over the last few years there has been an improvement in the information that Home Office decision makers have available to them, so that they can try and make the best decision that's available. But yes, it is a challenge.
Madeleine, thank you very much. I really, really appreciate you coming on and talking to us about this topic. Madeleine Sumption there, who's the Director of Migration Observatory. What do you make of all of that? Because we've got an exclusive now, ladies and gents, because out of the 40,000 people crossing the Channel this year, around a quarter of those are Albanian. GBNews has been given exclusive information about the activity of Albanian criminal gangs operating in the UK. It's a real eye-opener, this. It's been revealed that hundreds of millions of pounds in criminal proceeds are being sent back home to their country each year. So we pay to pick these people up in the Channel, we pay to process them, we pay to house them, and then some people get involved in criminal activity, and that money, shock horror, doesn't stay in our economy. Official sources have told GB News that much of the surge in Albanians arriving across the English Channel on small boats is being orchestrated by those very gangs. Many Albanian migrants are being exploited to manage cannabis farms across the UK as Albanian criminals have now taken over control of most of the country's cannabis trade, which was previously dominated by the Vietnamese gangs. Come back, Vietnamese gangs. All is forgiven. No, not really. Our Home and Security editor, Mark White, has this exclusive report.
Albanian gangs are the dominant force in organised crime across the UK. We've been told that Albanian crime groups are shipping hundreds of millions of pounds in criminal proceeds back to Albania every year. A number of different businesses, like car washes and barber shops, are often used to launder the proceeds of crime. But in truth, the vast majority of the money they make from their criminal endeavours is simply carried back to Albania by hand or in vehicles. Recently, border officials seized £300,000 bound for Albania in luggage at a UK airport. In another incident, £500,000 was found hidden inside a van at a UK port. Albanian crime gangs now control the majority of cannabis farms across the UK. They've taken over much of the cannabis cultivation trade from Vietnamese crime groups, with most of the Albanian cannabis farms concentrated in the north. But in pretty much every part of the country, you'll find Albanians are the dominant group involved in cannabis cultivation, as we found out recently in Suffolk. Is this what you're seeing time and again increasingly now, like other forces, that the Albanian organised criminal gangs are moving into these areas?
No, they are. They certainly seem to be on the up. They seem the dominant ones at the moment.
The trade in cannabis is largely self-contained amongst Albanian criminals here, with less control from crime bosses in their home country. In the south, they still control most of the cocaine trade, which is largely overseen by crime lords back in Albania. Across the UK, there has been a number of recent arrests of Albanians suspected of involvement in cross-channel people smuggling. Much of the surge in Albanians arriving by small boats lately is, we're told, being orchestrated by Albanian criminal gangs who want those people to work for them. Most of the people smuggling trade is still being controlled by Kurdish criminal gangs, but they are increasingly working in tandem with Albanian crime groups who are advertising and arranging for people from the Western Balkan nation to head for northwest France before handing them over to the Kurdish gangmasters. Social media is a massive tool the Albanians have been using to good effect to attract their fellow countrymen and women. We've learned that the National Crime Agency has persuaded social media companies to remove 1,700 such videos in recent months. But for every one they delete, many more pop up, persuading Albanians to cross the channel and enter the UK's illegal economy.
Yes, Mark White there with a fantastic exclusive report on what has been one of the main issues of the day. Coming up, Matt Hancock in the jungle. Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. Hancock goes down under, not for the first time. This is GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. We have got that story about little Matty Hancock, who's essentially going to be eating kangaroos' genitals for supper. You hate to see it. But serious concerns about whether or not he should even be there. Is he a celebrity? What happened when it came to the coronavirus crisis? What role did he have to play? Just a quick one from the inbox. gbviews@gbnews.uk, just to keep you all interested, because we're going to be going to your emails shortly. Make sure you keep them coming in. I've been asking whether or not you do actually agree with Suella Braverman. Is Britain being invaded? Catherine says, Patrick, let's face it, she's only saying what we're all thinking. I'll be back in a tick.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and his Chancellor Jeremy Hunt are expected to sign off on raising taxes significantly in the upcoming autumn budget. We had a brief window where people thought they were going to pay less tax. That apparently was just fantasy, because now we're all going to pay more. One Treasury official has warned it is going to be rough. Yeah, you're not joking. With an estimated £50 billion public hole in the finances to fill the tax hikes, they're being described as inevitable, basically. But what else is in store? Reports suggest that simply targeting the rich and cutting spending will not be enough. What do you mean, simply targeting the rich? I mean, good grief. Joining me now is Duncan Simpson, Chief Economist at the Taxpayers Alliance. Duncan, thank you very, very much. So basically, I might as well just set fire to a tenner and be done with it.
It does seem that way. I mean, pretty ominous warnings from a conspicuously anonymous source at the Treasury. But let's look at the full picture of what the government is doing and plan to be doing even before we get to this budget in a couple of weeks' time. So we know that total managed expenditure, which means the totality of all government spending in this country, is about £1.1 trillion. So as a proportion of GDP, that's about 40%. Now, the tax burden as well. So again, the proportion of taxes relative to the size of the economy is broadly the same as well, sort of just shy of £1 trillion this year. It's likely to be increasing in the following years. That's even before the government is going to ahead with many of these purported tax increases. So we at the moment in this country have a cost of government crisis where the spending has been escalated year after year, and obviously that was supercharged a couple of years back with many bits of COVID spending. But the Treasury needs to get real. They are the department which has been responsible.
Can we just rewind a bit, Duncan? Can we just rewind a bit? So this supposed £50 billion black hole in our public finances, where has that come from?
Well, I'm not quite sure what they're saying on this. I mean, obviously, there have been some changes now. Obviously, Kwasi Kwarteng's sort of mini budget, which has now been canned, did indeed have quite a few tax cuts. So we know from the figures that they put out at the time, there was supposed to be about almost £4 billion worth of tax cuts this year, and 5 years hence, it was up to about £45 billion. So it's possible it's derived from that. It's also possible that the government is thinking that there's different areas of spending which the Truss administration wasn't necessarily committed to, but now they are. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see in a couple of weeks' time. But the overall picture is bleak, and I would just say that the tax burden has for a couple of years now actually been at basically a post-war high. The idea that we are an under-taxed society, independently or relative to other rich countries, is completely for the birds. So the Treasury needs to get real and recognise that they've been escalating this for years.
But my concern would be that we have a current Chancellor who, didn't seem particularly against the idea of even tighter Chinese-style restrictions during the coronavirus crisis. There's a video of him laughing rather maniacally, I think, unfortunately, at the prospect of his sister, who lived in Beijing, being welded into her own home when she got back there. We have a Prime Minister who was the Chancellor during all of that and was just printing money out while simultaneously locking people away in their homes and also not allowing their business to actually survive on the other end of the pandemic. So just giving them an initial boatload of cash, but sorry, your business has now gone under because we all locked down for it. Both of them happen to be fabulously rich, not against wealth creation, that's all right. We also see what's going on in the Channel, that's going to cost us a load of money, and now on top of that, those people are complaining about there being a big black hole in our public finances. Some people might be forgiven for thinking, hang on a minute, this is all your fault and I don't fancy paying for it.
Yes, there's a lot of blame to go around. As you say, I mean, Sunak was in the Treasury for a couple of years, obviously overseeing that department. The Bank of England is also to blame here for escalating quantitative easing over a number of years. So that's an inflationary policy effectively, but not literally printing money to go towards that, which has indeed increased the inflationary pressures in this economy. So certainly, I mean, the two people at the top of government are very much to blame for part of this, but obviously it's slightly incoherent as well. I mean, obviously, Jeremy Hunt, when he was trying to be leader again this year, came out with a corporation tax cut to, I think it was 12%, or is trying to match the Irish as well. So on the one hand, Jeremy Hunt was a few months ago had very, very clear tax cutting instincts, good instincts, and now that's sort of completely gone out the water. So it does seem slightly intellectually dishonest positions which are both coming forward.
Well, it's remarkable, isn't it, really? It's such a shift, really. He's looked under the bonnet of the nation's finances and decided that the only way that we can possibly get out of this particular mess, some would argue a totally self-created mess, of course, is to tax people even more, to make them more skinned during a time of great national crisis. Just very quickly, sorry, because it's a story that I wonder whether or not you guys would wish to comment on. In fact, I think you might have done. The Taxpayers Alliance is something we're going to come to after the news, which is coming very, very shortly. About Matty Hancock, little Matty Hancock going into the jungle, and taxpayers are currently paying his salary. Talking of the coronavirus crisis, a lot of people are very wound up about his role in that. Just quickly, you think it's a disgrace to you that he's in the jungle?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this guy is a complete joke. The idea that he can stay in Parliament, in perpetuity and think he can get away with a career in reality television is absurd. I mean, he should do the decent thing, or rather his association should do the decent thing and get rid of him. At the very least, not take any money when he's there.
OK, there you go, Duncan. Thank you very much. Duncan Simpson, Chief Economist at the Taxpayers Alliance. There we go. Right, OK, ladies and gentlemen. Well, you heard right. That's right. We are going to be talking about little Matty Hancock going down under. Not for the first time, but coming up, the new season of Netflix, The Crown, will feature 2 episodes dedicated to Princess Diana's tell-all interview with Martin Bashir, where she famously said there were 3 of us in that marriage to the now King Charles. That's despite pleas from Prince William for it to never be shown again, as he said it worsened his mother's paranoia. Should the interview be consigned to the dustbin of history? Should Bashir be exposed for what he really is? Or is Netflix right to explore it? That's next, and yes, I will speak to TV property expert and someone who came joint 4th in I'm a Celebrity back in 2016. It's Martin Roberts, to ask him whether or not serving MP little Matty Hancock should be going into the jungle. But first, it's your latest headlines.
Patrick, thank you. The headlines this afternoon. Counter-terrorism police are now leading the investigation into the petrol bombing of a Dover immigration centre on Sunday. Kent police have described the incident as targeted and likely to have been driven by some form of hate-filled grievance. The suspect, named as 66-year-old Andrew Leake, was found dead at a nearby service station afterwards. As you've been hearing, the former Health Secretary Matt Hancock has had the Tory whip suspended with immediate effect after signing up to a TV reality show, I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. The Sun newspaper is reporting he's been confirmed as the 12th star to enter the Australian jungle. He resigned from the cabinet in June last year after breaching guidance on social distancing. The Home Secretary says large numbers of people are now being relocated from the Manston migrant processing facility in Kent. A union representing Border Force workers at the centre says the aim is to move 400 people today. Suella Braverman told the Cabinet they're being moved to relieve pressure caused by an unprecedented number of channel crossings. Around 4,000 people are thought to be at the centre, which was originally built to hold a maximum of 1,600. And police are searching a waste recycling plant in Leeds after human remains were found. Forensic officers are currently assessing the remains at Skelton Skips after receiving a report yesterday morning. We'll keep you updated on that as more comes to us. And Just Stop Oil say they're pausing their protests for the moment to give the government time to reconsider their responsibilities to the country. That comes after the climate activists tried to climb and lock themselves to the gates at Downing Street. Demonstrators also tried to block Whitehall by sitting on the road. They want the government to halt all new oil and gas licences. Those are the headlines. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. Patrick Christys is back in just a moment.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
On Mark Dolan Tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
The former Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, has had the Tory whip removed after joining this year's cast of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. That has to top the list of one of the weirdest things I think I've ever said on the news, but there we go. The Tory chief whip said it was serious enough to warrant suspension and that he'd taken the decision after speaking to the MP for West Suffolk. It's been met with the criticism by the campaign group for COVID-19 Bereaved Families for Justice, and amongst all of the light-hearted ribbing that I'm about to give Matt Hancock, I don't want to undermine what I think is a very serious issue, which is that the campaign group COVID-19 Bereaved Families for Justice must be absolutely beside themselves with rage at all of this. They clearly hold Matt Hancock responsible for the loss of some of their loved ones, and the idea that this guy will A, be called a celebrity off the back of it, B, be making quite a lot of money out of it, and C, be trying to, I suppose, almost whitewash his reputation on ITV, on one of the most watched shows that this country has, must be unbearable for them. They have called for ITV to remove him from the programme. There's also, of course, the simple issue of the taxpayer pays his wages. Why should he be living it large in Australia? But joining me now is the TV property expert and someone who came joint fourth, which is basically third, isn't it, in a way, on I'm a Celebrity back in 2016. It's Martin Roberts. Yes, Martin Roberts. How are you?
Yes. I'm very good. Like most people, a little bit bemused by the news, and I think you do bring up some really, really, really important points just then. And we can be flippant about this, and I can say things about what it's like being on the show. But your heart goes out to anybody who's watching this going, how the heck can somebody who some would say has not done what they need to do be benefiting in this way? I kind of look at it from the celebrity booker's point of view and think, what an amazing signing.
Absolutely.
They broken out the biggest bottle of champagne you could possibly imagine when the agent or whoever it was who spoke to Matt Hancock said, yes, they cannot have believed that this is actually going to happen. They make TV shows they want to make lots of people watch. A lot of people will watch. And maybe it's a chance for him to put another side to the story. Maybe it's a chance for him to show a different side of politicians. Maybe it's a chance for us to let the public really say what they think of him, because they can vote him, of course, to do the most horrendous things. And I think there's a lot of people who would quite like the idea of having him buried in a coffin and having snakes pulled over his head. Well, now's the chance for them to actually get him to do that. So maybe there's a wonderful, cruel irony here. And also, of course, they have the option to vote him off. And the first vote is always something which is quite perplexing for everyone who's on there, because nobody likes going out first. So it will be a really interesting test of public opinion, a genuine test of public opinion, to see if he's kicked out first and how many of the really slimy, horrible challenges he has to do.
Well, I suspect that the vast majority of the nation would quite like to see Matt Hancock gobbling up a pig's anus or something like that. But I think that politics, as they say, is showbiz for ugly people. And Matt Hancock has given that a go, OK? And it's not happened for the guy. I think he was always more into the showbiz element of it. He even started his own app. There was the Matt Hancock app when he was there at the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport, or whatever he was doing. And now he's actually giving proper showbiz a go. Do you think there's a chance that he has such a total lack of self-awareness, that he really does think that this might resurrect his career and that he's got a chance of coming across as likeable?
Yes.
Right, well, it's been great having you on the show, mate. Thank you very much, Martin. No, go on. So you think seriously?
Good night. It was fun. I think he has probably just decided that he has maybe run out of avenues for doing what his original career was going to be, and that his time is numbered. He possibly has forgotten the fact he's still an MP and he still has constituents who he needs to represent. And can he really do that when he's in the jungle and he's away for 3 weeks if something serious happens in Parliament that needs voting on and needs whatever?
Oh, no. Oh, well, that was Martin Roberts there, who finished joint fourth, basically third, on I'm a Celebrity just a few years ago. What do you make of that, ladies and gentlemen? Loads of serious questions to be asked about Matt Hancock's appearance on ITV's I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. I would like to say it is a fantastic booking from ITV. I appreciate that many people think he shouldn't be on there, but in terms of getting bums on seats and people watching the show, absolutely mega booking. A lot of people are saying, yes, we need a bit more of this in politics. We used to put people in the stocks, didn't we? Now, given Matt Hancock's response to the coronavirus crisis, we actually get to make him eat some kind of bush critter's genitalia or choke on witchetty grub or something that tastes like off cheese. And I'm all for that. But if I was one of his constituents who paid his wages, I would be against it. And if I was someone who felt as though I'd had a loved one who was bereaved or died as a result of some of the decisions that Hancock took, I would not be particularly happy seeing his face on my television every single day. He could donate his no doubt whopping fee, I suppose, to that group of people who feel as though their loved ones were killed as a result of some of the government's responses to the coronavirus pandemic. That might be a nice touch, mightn't it, little Matty Hancock? But moving away from that now. The hit series on Netflix, The Crown, will feature 2 episodes covering Princess Diana's interview with Martin Bashir. This is despite Prince William's plea for it not to be dramatised. Series 5, which airs next week, has drawn criticism for ignoring Prince William's request and for also including an intimate telephone conversation between the then Prince Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles. The streaming giant recently added a disclaimer to its Series 5 trailer, saying it was a fictional dramatisation inspired by real events. That's just not good enough. They can't pass it off as real. I'm sorry, but they are passing it off as real. But should The Crown dramatise the Diana interview? If they do, I'd quite like to tell the truth about Bashir and exactly what kind of journalist he is. But joining me now to discuss this is royal commentator Ingrid Seward and journalist and author Ella Whelan. Look, both of you, thank you very, very much. Ella, I'll start with you. Should Prince William's pleas to Netflix actually be adhered to? As somebody who clearly likes the idea of having a free press and the freedom of expression, I do have mixed feelings about that. I'm not sure that people should be dictated to just by what Prince William wants. Talk to me.
Yeah, I don't think you can have mixed feelings about it. It's, if you believe in press freedom, it's quite clear you don't get pushed around by royals or other journalists. I think that, you know, the interesting thing about this is that, you know, Diana as a figure was someone who cultivated and kind of encompassed the idea of the new royals as sort of quasi-celebrities. And she talked to herself about the fact that she wanted to be the queen of people's hearts. She very much was wanted to kind of display that sort of emotionalism that had been forbidden in the royal family previously. And, you know, even though, of course, there is the controversy here about paparazzi following her, and that can't have been pleasant, to put it mildly, she also was someone who, you know, was quite open about enjoying being available to people. And so it's sort of a bit ridiculous to suggest that you would shut down all kind of depiction of her in a TV series. By the way, a fantastic TV series, whether it's fictionalized or probably,
this is it.
You know, does have some truth to it.
Yeah, this is it. And I think I have to come down on this idea. I would feel deeply uncomfortable, Ingrid Seward, royal commentator, about the idea that a member of the royal family, albeit a future king, could contact a TV company and say, I don't want you to do this, and they then don't do it. There's a little bit North Korea.
Well, the trouble is, you see, I see that what you're saying is absolutely right, but the TV company in question, which was the BBC, tricked with the
and this is what I hope they depict. Carry on.
They tricked Diana into believing that she was under pressure from being spied upon by her own staff, and giving this interview to Bashir was a way of her putting her own thoughts forward. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. That's not a great detail on it, but I think therefore William did have a right, but I don't think that is the point. I think the point is that William and Harry and their mother has been our public property for so long, and I really think, and they asked us years ago, please, this is enough. And I just try and put yourself in that position, supposing it was your mother that they were depicting. I mean, it's a really uncomfortable, and I think one has the right to some privacy with one's parent. We've had years and years and years of owning Diana and getting every bit we can out of her. And I think it's just enough that they're depicting her in The Crown, fine, but why depict her in something that her son particularly asked?
I get that, but I think it could work both ways, because that's the thing that I really want depicted correctly, which is what Martin Bashir did in order to get that interview, and the way that he was lauded by the BBC at the time. He won awards for it, and then it all comes out, doesn't it, that there was deception involved and stuff like this. And I'm hoping, Ella, I'll bring you back in on this now, that is something that's depicted in this, because if it isn't, I know that The Crown says at the start, there's some kind of disclaimer, you know, this is a dramatised version of events. But you have real characters, OK, that the world knows, some of the most famous people, if not the most famous people in the world, and some of it is a realistic portrayal of what happened, and some of it isn't. And it doesn't flash up between each scene going, this is the fake bit. And especially foreign viewers as well might not know the intricacies of it as we do. I hope they do Bashir right in this.
Well, it would be interesting if they do go into that, because it is, it's something that's so kind of disastrously changed the course of the royal family and changed the narrative around how we saw them. And it was from a journalist point of view, one hell of an interview. And, I would actually defend as a journalist the right of people even to, unethical methods are unethical methods. And then it's not something that you would promote, but press freedom is press freedom. And once you get the interview in the bag, you should be allowed to use it. And, I think the thing with The Crown is most people know that it's not word for word exactly what, they know that it isn't exactly what the Queen and her mother discussed over sherry when they were watching the telly in the first series. We're not stupid when we're watching it. But I think I'm a Republican, from a Republican's point of view, but I'm a huge fan of the show because it's really, really good telly, and I love period drama, even at the best of times. But there's an interesting question as to, having this sort of insight into the royal family, fictional in places as it might be. I think Ingrid talked about we've owned Diana, and couldn't it just be your parents? These are people who are, undemocratically in power, and who have a lot of say in terms of politics now, particularly with King Charles and his loudmouth, as we know that he likes to sound off about certain issues. A little bit of scrutiny like this, I think, should be welcome.
Ella Whelan, thank you very much. Ingrid, I'll give the final word to you. Some people would say, yes, all right, look, it's very, very tragic what happened to Princess Diana. There's no diminishing that. It must have been awful for William. At the same time, he is a member of the royal family, and he gets a lot of the trappings of that. He's going to be king one day. There's a huge amount of money in the bank, and there's a lot of positives to being the future king of this country. Series on The Crown where his mum is depicted doing an interview that is already on public record. Is that the worst thing in the world?
Well, I mean, the sad thing is that people do believe everything they see in the crowd. Maybe, us in the know don't, but the majority of people, especially across the world, and lots of people have spoken to me and said, did that really happen? And the sad thing is that they do believe it, and they do think it's the absolute truth. And I think that's really part of the problem. And I think we should give William and Harry some leeway here. I really feel strongly about this. It's their mother, and I think we should, you talk about press freedom, but I think, press compassion is also very important.
Thank you very, very much. I mean, potential for a kind of War of the Worlds style moment now, when that film first came out and everyone thought we were actually being invaded by aliens. But there we are. Thank you very much. Ingrid Seward, who is a royal commentator and journalist and author, Ella Whelan, both of you, great stuff. Just discussing whether or not it's right for the Crown to depict that Princess Diana interview with Martin Bashir. We're going to go to the inbox now. Fantastic amount of emails that I've had in, because we've been covering so many great topics, and topics that clearly a lot of you feel aren't covered enough on other news outlets. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Just going to read one that I've got right in front of me here from Steve. Steve said... Thank you, Steve, by the way. He says he initially turned over the other side because he heard that we were going to be discussing The Crown. He said he decided to swap to BBC Parliament, where he was greeted by Bill Esterton, Shadow Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Minister, who was reading his notes, and he asks... He tells me, in fact, says, I kid you not, this is the most boring bloke ever. Welcome back, Steve. I can guarantee you, even if you think we're covering a boring topic here, we won't do it in a boring way. You're going to get discussions about a migrant invasion, little Matty Hancock eating a koala bear's balls, or indeed a bit of Bashir bashing. Never turn over, OK? Anyway, lots of you have been getting in touch as well. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Frank says, brave Suella Braverman says things as they are instead of supporting her. Get the problem sorted. And this is it. Is it just a distraction? Members this week in the House of Commons are uptight about the Home Secretary's choice of words. That is, of course, the fact that she used the word invasion. So there we are, the word invasion. How do you feel? I've been asking you to comment on that. Do you think we are indeed being invaded? Carl says, the easiest way to stop illegal immigration is if everyone stopped voting Labour, stopped voting Conservative, and started voting for Reform UK instead. Gosh, it's like a party political broadcast. It really is that simple. I suppose what we'd have to do there, though, is change electoral system, wouldn't we? Because with respect to Reform UK and other smaller parties like them, well, they're not going to win a majority, are they? So we would need some kind of voting reform. Darren says, Miss Braverman's comments about an invasion are correct. The MPs that are complaining about her comments are the reason that the Conservative Party will lose the next general election. And I can't help but wonder whether or not, unless Rishi Sunak really gets behind Braverman, or if he decides that he wants to biff Braverman as a result of her using turns of phrase like invasion. Frankly, the kind of turn of phrase that many people in many pubs up and down the country are saying on a daily basis and are thinking on a daily basis, because it's getting very serious. It's got serious a while ago, but it's reaching, I think people might argue, as a breaking point now when it comes to what's going on in the channel. If he gets rid of her because of that, then it does look a lot like, frankly, the Conservatives are finished, and maybe people might argue this country is as well, because what are Labour going to do about the problem? Anyway, the largest bird flu outbreak, shift in tone, people, the largest bird flu outbreak in the UK was announced yesterday, with the current situation being described as, quote, unbelievably bad by farmers, and they are warning that this could have an impact on the supply of Christmas turkeys. So from Monday the 7th of November, all birds, including free-range flocks, are to be kept indoors or in covered areas outdoors. There's also a ban that will be put in place to stop the movement of live birds. We're stopping freedom of movement. The virus has been caused by the H5N1 strain, which is highly infectious, causes rapid illness and death in chickens, ducks, turkeys and geese. Well, joining me now on the show is Danny Chambers, who's a veterinary surgeon and mental health campaigner. Danny, thank you very much. Danny, does this mean that we're not going to get turkeys this Christmas?
Well, it really is the biggest bird flu outbreak we've seen in this country's history. And the reason for that is normally what happens is the virus comes over in the wintertime. It comes with waterfowl. So, geese, ducks, ones that migrate back from Russia and Eastern Europe and further afield. And they bring H5N1 with them, and it affects our flocks. Now, normally, it dies out over the summertime, and then we sometimes get another infection when the birds come back again in the winter. Whereas this time, it's a really persistent infectious strain, and it didn't die out over the summertime. So it's actually spread to wildlife, and the wildlife I think it's 39 different bird species have been detected with it. So now we're going into the flu season for birds. We're going to have all these birds coming back over from Russia and the other side of Russia, and they'll be bringing it with them, and it's already here as well. So far this year alone, over 3 million birds have been culled due to bird flu. So it's a really unprecedented outbreak. And you're right, it's the H5N1.
Yeah, indeed. And actually, someone who I know has, bizarrely anyway, had text alerts on their phone for quite a while now about bird flu in the local area. And it has been increasing, and he's kept saying to me the whole time, when are you going to report on this? It's going to happen. I'm telling you, it's going to be the worst one ever. And now here we are. There we go. John, you're welcome. But seriously, though, I mean, look, I've been saying, it's bad news if you want a Christmas turkey. I mean, it is much worse for the birds, who are now facing some kind of Bernard Matthews-esque cull. But is there any chance this could affect humans as well? I don't know. Sorry, excuse my ignorance here. Can I get bird flu?
It's really unlikely. So it is a disease of birds, and it spreads between birds. In very unusual cases, if someone is in very close proximity to birds, ones that have been infected, especially sort of working in sometimes those wet markets that you've heard about in some countries where they're slaughtering the birds there and then, and there's a lot of aerosol around, a lot of moisture, then humans can sometimes get accidentally infected, but it's not something that will spread through, like it does between. It doesn't spread between people. It doesn't spread between birds and people. You have to really ingest it's spread in their feces. It's spread in their nasal discharge. It's spread in their eye discharge. You have to be in really close proximity to catch it off a bird. So it's not a public health risk at the moment. But what we do worry about, obviously, is like we had with recent pandemic and other bird flus, is that they can mutate and they can become infectious to humans. So this one isn't, but that's always a possibility.
So as it currently stands, you'd have to ask serious questions about what that individual was doing that close to a turkey if they end up catching bird flu. But hopefully it doesn't jump. But look, Danny Chambers, thank you very, very much. Danny Chambers, a veterinary nurse and mental health campaigner, just reacting to record levels, high levels of bird flu in the country. We've just had a pandemic. Not now, bird flu. All right, not now. Anyway, stay with me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News Live. Lots to come in the next hour. I will continue to focus on this migrant crisis, how the Home Secretary is coming in for flack for using the word invasion. I've been asking you throughout the show, gbviews at gbnews.uk, do you actually think that Britain, the south coast of Britain, is being invaded? So far, overwhelmingly, the vast majority of you think yes. And Suella Braverman was saying what we were all thinking. Your views, please. Also, little Matty Hancock. Yes, that's right. He's going to be in I'm a Celebrity. Get me out of here. Hancock goes down under. The jokes write themselves. I'll see you in a sec.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
Welcome back, everybody. This is GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys, on your TV, radio and online for the next hour. We're in the business end of this show. So coming up, counter-terrorism police, this broke just a little earlier on, are now leading the investigation into that firebombing of a Dover immigration centre on Sunday. The suspect has been named as 66-year-old Andrew Leake. But the news comes as the Home Secretary is under pressure, bizarrely anyway, for the choice of words she used to describe what's going on in the channel. She said it was an invasion. That word apparently has resonated a lot with a lot of you as our viewers and our listeners. Get in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Do you actually think we are being invaded? Do you mind that she used that word? Suella Braverman is taking flack for that, but I suspect she's saying what many people are thinking. We also have a GB News exclusive because more than 10,000 of the 40,000, so more than a quarter of those people who've crossed the channel this year, are from Albania. Official sources have told us that gangs are pushing them across the channel to operate in Britain's cannabis trade and cocaine trade, etc. We're going to be discussing all of that. I'm also going to be getting stuck right into Matt Hancock, because Matt Hancock likes eating spiders and sleeping with snakes because he's heading into the jungle. Apparently, I'm no longer allowed to make reference to other things that he might be eating in the jungle because apparently it's a family show. Anyway, the former Health Secretary is joining the cast of I'm a Celebrity. Lots of challenges facing him then. Someone better tell him where the cameras are this time, though. He's fallen foul of that before. But yes, I am going to be discussing all of that and much, much more. Get your views coming in. gbviews at gbnews.uk. I am very serious about what we're talking about at the top of the show. We're having a big debate as to whether or not the use of the word invasion is right. More importantly, as far as I'm concerned, I think, yes, it is right. Where do we put all of these people? How do we stop it? What is Labour's plan to stop it? Because I don't think there is one. All of that and much, much more coming your way after the latest headlines.
Patrick, thanks very much indeed. The latest headlines on GB News. And our top story today, as you've been hearing from Patrick, the suspect in the firebombing of a Dover immigration centre is reported to have been posting anti-Muslim rants on Facebook. Kent police have named the man as 66-year-old Andrew Leake from High Wycombe. He was found dead at a nearby service station after the attack. Counter-terrorism police are now leading the investigation. They say it was likely to have been driven by some form of hate-filled grievance. The former Health Secretary Matt Hancock has had the Conservative whip suspended with immediate effect after signing up to be on a reality TV show. He's set to appear on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, with the Sun newspaper saying he's been confirmed as the 12th star to enter the Australian jungle. He resigned from the Cabinet in June last year after breaching guidance on social distancing. The series starts this Sunday, but Mr Hancock is expected to be one of 2 latecomers to join the camp. The Home Office says large numbers of people are now being relocated from the Manston migrant processing facility in Kent. Suella Braverman told a meeting of Cabinet Ministers the migrants are being moved to other accommodation in order to relieve pressure caused by the unprecedented number of channel crossings. Around 4,000 people are thought to be at the centre, which was originally built to house 1,600. Conservative MPs, including Andrew Bridgen, have been defending the Home Secretary after she described the influx of migrants as an invasion.
I think Suella Braverman is the best chance we've got of halting this. And she's getting a lot of pushback from the left because they know that she's serious about dealing with it. And quite honestly, if the Conservative government can't come up with a solution in the next 18 months, I think it's going to be very difficult for us at the next general election. Indeed, we've got local elections next May.
Well, in other news today, ambulance staff in Scotland have voted overwhelmingly to strike over pay. 8,000 members of the GMB Scotland Union working for the Scottish Ambulance Service and Greater Glasgow and Clyde Health Board were balloted. It means nearly 4,000 staff, including paramedics, nurses and radiographers, could walk out. The union is urging the Scottish Government to bring forward a significantly improved pay offer to avoid industrial action over the winter. The campaign group Just Stop Oil say they're pausing protests for the moment to give the government time to consider its responsibilities to the country. It comes after the environmental activists tried to climb and lock themselves to the gates of Downing Street. The demonstrators also tried to block Whitehall, some sitting on the road, while others glued themselves to the tarmac. They want the government to halt the granting of all new oil and gas licences. Sinn Féin's Stormont leader says the party's none the wiser on whether there'll be an election after holding talks with the Northern Ireland Secretary. Michelle O'Neill says Chris Heaton-Harris offered no clarity on how he plans to deal with the ongoing uncertainty at Stormont, and she accused him of making a bizarre U-turn by failing to call a vote last Friday. Speaking after the meeting, she said the public is being continually held in limbo.
I'm none the wiser today in terms of his next step. He didn't make that very clear. As I said, he didn't colour in the lines. He didn't say what his next move was. But, you know, you can't escape the reality that there's an obligation on him, a legal obligation on him to call the election. Instead, he's created a political vacuum.
Well, the Democratic Unionist Party leader, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, says he too feels in the dark, but is prepared if there's a vote.
If an election is called, we are ready to fight that election. We're putting our candidates in place. We've our literature agreed. We're getting our campaign arrangements finalised. So if an election is called, we'll be there. We'll take our case to the people. We will seek to renew and indeed to strengthen our mandate.
Meanwhile, in Yorkshire, police are searching a waste recycling plant in Leeds after human remains were found there. Forensic officers are currently assessing the remains at Skelton Skips after receiving a tip-off from a member of the public yesterday morning. We'll bring you more on that as we get it. You're with GB News, more news as it happens. Now back to Patrick Christys.
Yes, welcome back, everybody. This is GB News Live. Let's not mess around, because it's been confirmed that counter-terrorism detectives are now leading the investigation into that incident of a Dover migration centre on Sunday that was firebombed. Kent Police confirmed the news as the suspect was named as 66-year-old Andrew Leake from High Wycombe in Buckinghamshire. It all comes amid a backdrop of Suella Braverman yesterday, in fact, live on this show, discussing her plans for immigration in the House of Commons. What she said proved controversial for reasons I am yet to understand. She said that we were being invaded. Right, well, if you look at the dictionary definition of invasion, it would appear in some senses anyway to match it exactly. She also said that we need to stop pretending that all of these people coming over the channel are indeed asylum seekers and genuine refugees. That is patently not true. She was copying it left, right and centre. I'm yet to see Rishi Sunak really stand full square behind her and give her the support I think she needs. She was undermined by another minister earlier on who said that he would not have used that language himself. I tell you what, it's going down incredibly well in my inbox here, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Lots of you think she's right, and she's saying, frankly, what we're all thinking. I think we witnessed yesterday a one-woman line of defence, pretty much, when it came to what's been going on in the Channel. People think that rhetoric was bad, invasion. What about the rhetoric that we've had to stuff her left, right and centre for years, being gaslit by people telling us that all of these people are nice refugees and asylum seekers when they knew full well that that wasn't true? What about that kind of rhetoric? Wasn't that actually quite inflammatory? Obviously, Suella Braverman is going to be cracking on, it would appear, but Dr Dennis McShane, a former Labour MP for Rotherham and indeed a former Minister of State for Europe, joined me earlier on. This is what he had to say about how Labour would solve the problem, because as far as I can see, they don't want to.
Well, I would hope they would speed up processing. It drove me and all my generation of MPs mad, because we had endless people coming in then from Pakistan and India and East Africa claiming they were coming for family reunion marriages. Some of them were, some of them weren't. But it took a year, 2 years. Files have got fatter and fatter and fatter. I don't know what's wrong with the Home Office and the justice system that they don't throw resources at this. We shipped people home when I was a minister. I remember talking with David Blunkett, arranging transport flights back. I went down to Tirana, and that's where our minister should go.
And the question is, Dennis, where do we put them all? Where do we put them all?
Well, where they were put when they were all coming here in the late 1990s, millions coming through. So where we put them all? They were put in cheap hotels, usual. Yeah, they were actually often in cities, but in working class areas. That's just where the cheap hotels were. They're not going to be put up in the Dorset or the Ritz, are they?
Right. OK, well, there you go. That was former Labour MP Dennis McShane there. Let's be honest, ladies and gentlemen, Labour do not appear to have a plan. We keep asking relentlessly on this issue to get Labour MPs on. We keep being told no, which is unfortunate, because we could just ask them directly. But alas, no, a gaping hole when it comes to Labour in this. Could it be, some would suspect, that they would just simply open the floodgates and hope that they would have a ready army of future voters? Some would say that was Tony Blair's plan all along. Joining me right now is Out Mehmet, chairman of Migration Watch UK. Are we being invaded?
Look, this is a crisis. It's an absolute crisis, and it merits really tough talking. It merits the right sort of words that describe what's going on. I think Suella Braverman has done exactly that. It may be that the Islington and Notting Hill dinner set want it all played in accordance with their rules, but I'm afraid that won't work. What Dennis McShane said earlier, a good friend, a former minister of mine, I recall when I was an immigration officer in the 70s, Jim Halligan was Home Secretary. And he took over at a time when a chap called Alex Lyon was the immigration minister. Alex Lyon instructed immigration officials here and in the subcontinent to issue all the visas, all the entry clearances, we call them then, to those who were applying, because there was a finite number. Guess what? There wasn't a finite number. The numbers just kept going up and up and up. And in the end, Jim Halligan sacked him.
Right.
Because it was a nonsense. And exactly the same thing is being proposed now by the Labour Party, that we should let them all in, that they should all come in, and therefore that will deal with a problem. It won't. It won't in the least. All it will do is attract more and more and more. And we mustn't lose sight of why we've got this problem, Patrick.
Why?
We've had 40,000 this year.
Yep.
25,000 in the last 4 months. 7,000 coming in this month. Do you know, the Armada, when the Spanish invaded, there were 150 ships, 18,000 men. We've had 980 boats coming over this time with 40,000 people.
Well, there you go.
What
there you
can I
go.
say?
Well, absolutely. And parallels there, I suppose, you talking about one being an invasion, but we're not allowed to call another one an invasion. From where I'm sitting now, I think we are standing on the precipice in this country. I've thought this now, especially in the last few days, and I think history will remember this specific periods of time in Britain where we really are at a very, very decisive moment. A moment that I think could go on to define the future of this nation. We are currently in a situation where we're having record numbers of people coming here across the channel. We have no clear way of stopping them, and we have a deterrent being deliberately stopped by people and an opposition that is deliberately not coming up with any way to stop this. And I think when people use the language like invasion and they get criticised for it, it's because people are angry and people recognise the situation that we're currently in. If we don't do something now, this country could change irreversibly forever, could it not?
It's changing. The speed with which we've had immigration over the last 20 years is already having that sort of impact. So, yes, we do have to address this seriously. Bear in mind what Suella Braverman said in the party conference. She wasn't just referring to the channel, she was also referring to overall immigration. That needed to be addressed as well. And I think that this is why those on the left and those within her own party are seriously concerned, because A, she not only gets it, but she seems to have the brain as well to be able to implement the sort of policies that she thinks are necessary.
And where's Rishi Sunak in all of this? Suella Braverman stood up there yesterday. When she first walked in, I felt for the girl because I thought, oh, goodness me, she doesn't look quite herself. And no wonder, she's copied it left, right and centre. And then she stands up and you could see she got into her stride and she went, you know what, actually, let's have it right. All of these people coming over here, you've been lying to us, gaslighting a nation from the other side of those benches, saying that they're all asylum seekers and refugees. They are not all asylum seekers and refugees, to put it mildly. She then said, well, it's an invasion on our south coast. All right, a lot of people think that actually it is. Where is Rishi Sunak? He should be standing full square behind her. She was undermined by one of her immigration ministers earlier who said he wouldn't have used divisive rhetoric. It's not divisive if it's the truth.
Well, look, she undoubtedly was placed there in order to take these, as Home Secretary...
Or she hung out to dry now.
In order to take these policies and implement these measures. Now, Rishi Sunak is not daft. I think he's done quite well so far. And, you know, let's bear in mind where he comes from originally as well, or his family come from. The fact is that this country is only too pleased to welcome people like me and people like your family, if I may say so.
Absolutely,
But the fact is, it's all about the scale and speed of what is happening. Rishi Sunak doesn't know anything now that he didn't know when he appointed Suella Braverman.
I think that a lot of people on those Labour benches are getting increasingly wound up because they can't handle the idea that a Home Secretary who comes from an ethnic minority background and a Prime Minister who comes from an ethnic minority background might actually want to do something about illegal immigration, not out of racism, but out of principle.
That's why they're doing it, because they are afraid, for goodness sake. They haven't got any alternative policies, so they think, right, let's go for the player rather than the ball. That's what's happening now.
Alp, always a pleasure. Thank you very much. Alp Mehmet there, Chairman of Migration Watch UK. It's got you all going here in the inbox, GBViews at gbnews.uk. A little bit later on, not so long now, in about 10 minutes' time or so, we are actually going to be having a debate on this very topic about whether or not Yes, OK, initially, do you feel as though we're being invaded? More importantly, where do we put all of these people? If it's not going to stop anytime soon, we're being blocked from doing anything about it, we're giving a load of money to the French to not do anything about it, the numbers are not going to stop. And the question is, where do we put them? Because I think when those facts are laid bare and we're confronted by things like tent cities in local parks, I would expect the vast majority of the population to be more inclined to agree with some of Suella Braverman's comments from yesterday. But in her address in the Commons, Suella Braverman singled out Albanian asylum seekers, insisting the majority of them are adult single males, and not women or children or elderly people. But of course, those are just facts. And we can't have that in the House of Commons, can we? Out of the 40,000 people crossing the Channel this year, around a quarter of those are Albanian, and GB News has been given exclusive information about the activity of Albanian criminal gangs operating in the UK. You will not believe this, ladies and gentlemen, the expose that our wonderful Mark White, our Home and Security Editor, has done on this. It's been revealed that hundreds of millions of pounds in criminal proceeds are being sent back to their home country each year. So we're paying to pick them up, we're paying the French not to stop them, we're paying to house them, we're paying to process them, and then they take that money and send it straight back. There we go. Official sources have told GB News that much of the surge of Albanians arriving across the English Channel on small boats is being orchestrated by illegal gangs. Many Albanian migrants are being exploited, apparently, to manage cannabis farms across the UK. Albanian criminals have now taken over control of most of the country's cannabis trade. In fact, they're gloating about it on Twitter. It used to be dominated by the Vietnamese gangs, but they've made them look like child's play, haven't they? Our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, has this exclusive report.
Albanian gangs are the dominant force in organised crime across the UK. We've been told that Albanian crime groups are shipping hundreds of millions of pounds in criminal proceeds back to Albania every year. A number of different businesses, like car washes and barber shops, are often used to launder the proceeds of crime. But in truth, the vast majority of the money they make from their criminal endeavours is simply carried back to Albania by hand or in vehicles. Recently, border officials seized £300,000 bound for Albania in luggage at a UK airport. In another incident, £500,000 was found hidden inside a van at a UK port. Albanian crime gangs now control the majority of cannabis farms across the UK. They've taken over much of the cannabis cultivation trade from Vietnamese crime groups, with most of the Albanian cannabis farms concentrated in the north. But in pretty much every part of the country, you'll find Albanians are the dominant group involved in cannabis cultivation, as we found out recently in Suffolk. Is this what you're seeing time and again increasingly now, like other forces, that the Albanian organised criminal gangs are moving into these areas?
No, they are. They certainly seem to be on the up. They seem the dominant ones at the moment.
The trade in cannabis is largely self-contained amongst Albanian criminals here, with less control from crime bosses in their home country. In the south, they still control most of the cocaine trade, which is largely overseen by crime lords back in Albania. Across the UK, there has been a number of recent arrests of Albanians suspected of involvement in cross-channel people smuggling. Much of the surge in Albanians arriving by small boats lately is, we're told, being orchestrated by Albanian criminal gangs who want those people to work for them. Most of the people smuggling trade is still being controlled by Kurdish criminal gangs, but they are increasingly working in tandem with Albanian crime groups, who are advertising and arranging for people from the Western Balkan nation to head for northwest France before handing them over to the Kurdish gangmasters. Social media is a massive tool the Albanians have been using to good effect to attract their fellow countrymen and women. We've learned that the National Crime Agency has persuaded social media companies to remove 1,700 such videos in recent months. But for every one they delete, many more pop up, persuading Albanians to cross the channel and enter the UK's illegal economy.
Mark White, thank you very much. Mark White there, our Home and Security Editor. Well, to break this down further, I am joined by the Co-Executive Director of the Law Enforcement Action Group, Jason Reed. Jason, thank you very, very much. When you, as we all did, had to sit through for quite a while of people saying, look, come on, these people all deserve our compassion. These people are all fleeing horrific circumstances and stuff. Were you sitting there thinking, well, hang on a minute, I know for a fact that a lot of them are involved in organised crime?
One of the things that you always find when is an illicit trade, so the drug trade has been illicit in this country for the last 50 years, is that there'll always be a person to fill the gap. So we saw it in Prohibition in America. That's why we've got Al Capone. And we're seeing it now. It's happened, as you mentioned, it was Vietnam gangs that were doing it. It's now transitioned to Albanians. And if we don't have Albanians controlling it, there'll be someone else. And this is because we've got such a lucrative trade that in this country alone is worth about 10 billion that's going to organised crime. So what do we do to solve that? This is the reason when we have got emplacements around the world like Germany that have just regulated their cannabis system, one of the main things that always gets flagged up is that regulation is a tool against organised crime. So if you want to take the profits away, there's only one way we can do that.
Yeah, I do get all of that in terms of, you know, if we legalise the white stuff and the green stuff, then maybe it would stop this illegal trade in it. But at the same time, though, it's not just that element that the Albanian gangs are involved with. It's not just the drugs trade, it's other elements as well. And they appear, my understanding anyway, is that they appear to be pretty violent and using extreme scare tactics. In fact, there are videos now on TikTok of torture. They kind of muscle in a way that maybe other gangs don't do. Just talk to me about that.
I think that we're only getting to grips with what the illegal drug trade is doing because of social media and the way that the media works in general, and also things like Netflix, the way that we got dramatisations. If you look at the membership of the organisation that I represent, Law Enforcement Action Partnership, one of the main people that come forward to say that our drug laws don't work and the exploitation that go with the drug laws is the undercover operatives. So we've got Neil Woods, we've got people that I can't even mention because they're in witness protection. Yeah. These are the people that come forward that have seen from undercover operations what goes on with regards to exploitation, torturing. And this has been going on for decades. It really has. But we're getting to grips with it now because it's becoming more prominent. And it's getting worse because it's only going to get more worse all the while that we have got a lucrative trade. The profits are going up, which means the exploitation tactics are going up. That's never going to get solved all while we have this prohibition.
Look, I've got to be honest with you. I'm very, very sceptical as to about exactly how much these people are being exploited. They must know that if you're an Albanian chap and you want to come to the UK and you're speaking to other people in the UK, that they are involved in the drugs trade and therefore they are coming knowing and volunteering to be a part of an organised crime gang that deals in human misery. I mean, is there exploitation here or are we just importing criminals?
It's about what also the criminals, as we say, are doing to citizens as well. So there's a practice called cuckooing. So the gangs will put pressure on people that are vulnerable, potentially disabled people that have already got a connection to the cannabis trade. They're applying pressure to grow in the houses of those domestic setups. And this is always going to be the case again because of the way that the trade works. There's going to be exploitation, there's going to be coercion, but there's also going to be people that are going to be doing this because they know the profit's there. And there's no way of getting around from that because, as you said, it goes back to the profits go back to Albania, the profit goes back to Vietnam. The profits, unfortunately, are going outside of this country, which is why people like myself are always going to be campaigning for a regulated system.
Yeah, OK, fair enough. Jason, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. I think I've spoken to you before. I'll have to speak to you again soon. Co-Executive Director there of the Law Enforcement Action Group. Revealing stuff, this, people. I would hope that we've had a little chat already at the top of this hour. The two key points from Suella Braverman's speech and questions in the House of Commons were about whether or not we are being invaded. According to Out Mehmet, the head of Migration Watch UK, we essentially are, certainly when you look at the dictionary definition of it, which is an unwelcome intrusion into another's domain. Well, there we go. And whether or not we should be holding our hands up now and stopping this ridiculous gaslighting from the other side of the chamber in the House of Commons that all of these people are refugees and asylum seekers with good intentions. We've just spoken to Mark White, there, our Home and Security Editor, with an exclusive report on how many of them are getting involved in the organised crime trade, and indeed someone there who, of course, knows it arguably better than anyone else, which is Law Enforcement Action Group Co-Exec Director, who has basically kiboshed all of this ridiculous rhetoric. This is GBNews Live with me, Patrick Christys. Coming up, former Health Secretary Little Matty Hancock had the whip removed after it was announced that he'd be appearing in I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. Should he be staying off the telly, or is he right to put himself out there? What do you make of it? I'll be discussing it now with Christys Hamilton, who spent time in the jungle back in 2002, the very first edition of the show. And we're going to be having a head-to-head debate as well about where on earth we put people who do come over the channel. Back in a mo.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Patrick's back in just a moment, but first, let's look at the latest news headlines on GB News. And the top story, the suspect in the firebombing of a Dover immigration centre is reported to have been posting anti-Muslim rants on Facebook. Kent Police are now saying they've named the man as 66-year-old Andrew Leake from High Wycombe in Buckinghamshire. He was found dead at a nearby service station after the attack. Counter-terrorism police are now leading the investigation. They say it was likely to have been driven by some form of hate-filled grievance. The former Health Secretary Matt Hancock has had the Tory whip suspended with immediate effect after signing up to a reality TV show, I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. The Sun newspaper is reporting he's been confirmed as the 12th star to enter the Australian jungle. He resigned from the Cabinet in June last year after breaching guidance on social distancing. And the Home Secretary says large numbers of people are now being relocated from the Manston migrant processing facility in Kent. A union representing Border Force workers at the centre says the aim is to move 400 people today. Suella Braverman told the Cabinet the people are being moved to relieve pressure caused by an unprecedented number of channel crossings at the moment. Around 4,000 people are thought to be at the centre currently, which was built originally to hold 1,600. And police are still searching a waste recycling centre in Leeds after human remains were found. Forensic officers are currently assessing the remains at Skelton Skips after receiving a tip-off from a member of the public yesterday morning. We'll keep you updated on that if anything comes to us. And Just Stop Oil, the environmental campaigners say they're pausing their protests for the moment to give the government time to consider its responsibilities to the country. It comes after the climate activists tried to climb and lock themselves to the gates at Downing Street today. Demonstrators also tried to block Whitehall by sitting on the road. They want the government to halt the granting of all new oil and gas licences. That's your headline. Those are your headlines. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB Plus radio. You're with GB News. Don't go anywhere. Patrick is here now.
Yeah, welcome back, everybody. I'm absolutely loving some of these emails that are coming in here about some solutions for our debate that we're going to be having shortly about where on earth we put some of these people who are coming across the channel. We can't keep putting them in social housing stock, that's awful. We can't keep putting them in the lower end of the private rental sector. Hotels, goodness gracious me, where on earth do we put them? Someone's just emailed in with a response that I'm bang in favour of. He says, why don't we put them in woke areas? There we go. We could do a Martha's Vineyard. They did that in America, didn't they? The place where like Obamas and that kind of people have their multi-million-pound houses, all this kind of wokerati. They don't like it, do they? They don't like it. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Keep those views coming in and those suggestions coming in. But before that, the former Health Secretary, Little Matty Hancock, has had the Tory whip removed after joining this year's cast of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. The Tory chief whip said it was serious enough to warrant suspension, and that he had taken the decision after speaking to the MP for West Suffolk. It's been met with criticism by the campaign group COVID-19 Bereaved Families for Justice, and I think that's really, really important to note. It called the decision sickening and called for ITV to remove him from the programme. Joining me now is the author and commentator who came third place in the 2002 series of I'm a Celeb. It's Christine Hamilton. Christine, thank you very, very much. Right, OK, look, there's two elements to this, possibly three, actually. The first one is, and certainly something that I don't want to make light of at all, and I take very seriously, which is the fact that people who feel as though their relatives and their loved ones died unnecessarily as a result of some of the decisions that Matt Hancock took during the coronavirus pandemic must be absolutely livid. You've then also got the idea of if you're a constituent of his, where's he gone and how can he do his job, and the taxpayer, etc. You do also have the hilarious idea of Matt Hancock having to eat some kind of bush critter's genitalia at some point, which I think we would all love to see. Let's start with first things first. Families of people who feel as though their loved ones were killed unnecessarily, died unnecessarily, I should say, as a result of some of his decisions, have got a right to be absolutely seething, haven't they?
They absolutely have. I mean, he's just sticking two fingers up to all of them. I think it's appalling. And I think their resentment, their horror at what he's doing is probably the first thing to take into account. Absolutely. I think they're very justified in the way they think. I mean, look at the way he and Chris Whitty behaved. It's easy to forget, but it's actually not easy to forget the sort of horror that we all went through. And the people who suffered really badly have every right to be absolutely staggered and furious about all this. They really do. And, you know, he's a member of Parliament. He may think that his ministerial career is over, but he is still a member of Parliament. And if you do it properly, it's a full-time job. He's paid very handsomely by the taxpayer. His job is in Westminster and his constituency. And what the hell is he doing? Shooting off to Australia for weeks on end. I mean, MPs, I don't think Boris should have gone to the Caribbean the other day while the House was sitting. You know, MPs, they have plenty of recess when they can take their holidays. So I think it's a disgrace. And I'm pleased that he's lost the whip. It's the least they could do. You know, the Jungle had already they got Mike Tyndall, who I would have thought was a big draw. They got Boy George. Honestly, the idea that they need Matt Hancock, but he is probably going to put a lot of bums on seats, which is what it's all about. I'll tell you what I think, Patrick. I think he is hoping, he knows his political career is over. He is hoping to turn himself into a little national treasure like Ed Balls did when he went on Strictly and then started to present some very good television programmes. But honestly, Matt Hancock, Ed Balls, you ain't. It isn't going to work for you. I just don't think he's a likeable enough character.
If Matt Hancock thinks that he's going to become a national treasure, seriously, then he must be thick as mince, because there's absolutely no way, shape or form that anyone would think that Matt Hancock is going to become a national treasure. There is the taxpayer element to this. He's had the whip withdrawn, OK? So do you think that he should not be getting paid by the taxpayer whilst he's in Australia eating kangaroo bottom or something? And actually, frankly, should he maybe donate the money, which will be sizable, from I'm a Celebrity to, I don't know, charity?
Well, he has already said that he will make a donation, whatever that is. But no, he won't be earning his money as an MP, so I don't see why he should be paid. But more importantly, because it's a vastly bigger sum involved. I mean, he's rumoured to be getting about £350,000 for this. Much better would be to hand over a great deal of that, maybe some of that money to help COVID victims. You know, and he's so naive. He said, or somebody on his behalf, because he hasn't spoken yet, it's going to be very good to get out to meet millions of people through a different medium, and I can talk about my dyslexia campaign. If he honestly thinks that ITV are going to use prime time television to hear Matt Hancock on dyslexia, they're going to be using their prime time television slots, watching him eat all the unmentionables that you said. And I mean, that'll be very funny, but he'll be laughing all the way to the bank. Now, he certainly doesn't deserve his MP's salary. It's an absolute insult. The sheer brass neck of the guy. Takes some beast. It really does.
Look, I agree. Yeah, there's two sides. Yes, I am absolutely going to enjoy watching him getting pumped full of critters and, you know...
You are going to watch, are you?
And I am now because of this. And I can't deny that, Christine. I absolutely am going to watch it because of this, because I do want to see Matt Hancock being placed in a position of deep personal discomfort. But at the same time, celebrity he ain't. The idea that he stood before the nation every single day and shackled us down and released people with COVID into care homes and loved one died and all of this stuff, and that has made him a celebrity. Goodness gracious me. What sickening kind of society do we live in? But, Christine, I'm going to have to let you go. Christine Hamilton, thank you very much. Author, commentator, of course, former I'm a Celeb contestant back in 2002. At least Matt Hancock won't have to worry about hidden cameras this time. Willie, there we go. Right, coming up, how should the government solve the growing pressure to house the thousands of migrants crossing the Channel to seek asylum in the UK? People have been emailing in thick and fast, gbviews@gbnews.uk, saying, why don't we just dump them in woke areas? Why not, maybe? If they vote for a party that actually wants that kind of thing, maybe they should bear the brunt of it. I'll be debating that next. I'll be back in a mo.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you know, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Yeah, it's coming up shortly. We've got this big channel debate, people. You do not want to miss that. It's going to be fiery and it's going to be heated. What on earth do we do about the people coming over? Where do we put them? And frankly, do you feel as though we are being invaded? But before that, British police officers travelling to Qatar for the World Cup, so they won't act as morality police. Oh, grief, that's nice, isn't it? Thank you very much. They will not be acting as morality police. We'll just leave that to the Pakistani police and the Turkish police and the Qatari police, who are also policing this World Cup. They want to maintain calm as England and Wales fans enter the country. Good luck with that. Chief Constable Mark Roberts said the UK delegation will include what he described as supporter engagement officers who will act as a buffer between supporters and the Qatari law enforcement. Mr Roberts said they would only focus on fans who were starting to draw a bit of attention and risk causing offence, and not tell supporters whether or not they had 1 pint too many. Joining me now is sports journalist Ben Jacobs. Ben, thank you very much. Now, look, sometimes England away fans don't travel that well. Sometimes they're great. But one of the great things about a World Cup is that it's a celebration. Instead, we've plonked it in a country that has got absolutely zero footballing pedigree, an abominable human rights record, and we are going to be policed in part by the Pakistani police force, the Turkish police force, and some Brits who say they're going to act as a buffer between us and the Qatari police. I mean, this is an accident waiting to happen, surely.
Well, I think the first thing to say is that any World Cup, it's normal for country-based policing in addition to local policing, because obviously British police will understand England fans, Wales fans, and so on. So the actual presence of them is not atypical, but their role may well be. And you can look at it two ways. Either, as you say, it's an accident waiting to happen, or alternatively, they're genuinely a buffer, because if you're an England fan, would you rather be warned by your own police and then have them there to advise you on the situation, or would you rather risk police that you've never dealt with implement a punishment that might be based on a country's laws that you're not familiar with? So I don't think
I don't think these countries with these kind of laws, bear in mind a lot of these laws are religious-based, so they're looking up. They don't look at PC Plod from the Met Police and give two hoots about him because they're serving a higher power. So if someone decides to walk down the street topless, 9 pints deep, singing 2 World Wars and 1 World Cup, and then holds hand with their boyfriend, presumably they're in a Qatari jail. Are they?
I think that's an over-exaggeration, because you've got to bear in mind that the local organising committee of the World Cup and the police have been speaking to FIFA for many, many years about how they will deal with the situation. So what you say may well be correct if you just rocked up outside of a World Cup in certain parts of the Middle East. But during a World Cup, the expectation, certainly for me, talking to the local organising committee, if they keep their word, is that they will show some leniency and ultimately they will respect the kind of culture that football brings, providing that football fans respect to some extent the religious culture that Qatar follows. And it's a balance and it's a grey area, clearly. So as you say, either all these fans are going to come in and then we're going to get a disaster, because what we've been told in the build-up about everyone respecting each other's beliefs and rules will not be the reality, and we might see far more arrests at the World Cup than ever before. Or hopefully that's where the British police come in and other country-based police, and they will be able to step in and say, hang on a minute, because once again, if you are dealt with first and foremost by a British police officer, hopefully that negates the need for the other police that you mentioned to step in and potentially, in a worst-case scenario, slap you in jail.
Yeah, I can see exactly why people are getting bogged down, as indeed I am, with just the kind of morality police elements of all of this stuff. But there's another serious element to this. Qatar in itself is not used to dealing with this amount of people in this short a period of time. You know, we've seen, for example, even the French police decided to fill the Scousers in when they went over there for a European final, and that was a European police force. What's going to happen over there when you have this many people if there's some kind of stampede, or the police who are used to acting in a heavy-handed manner? We see disasters like this all the time. In fact, nobody needs to tell the Liverpool fans twice about the kind of disaster that you can see if things aren't handled correctly. I've got serious concerns that you forget the LGBT element of it, forget the boozing element of it, just focus on the sheer numbers of people. I think that could be a serious, serious problem. Crushings, for example, because they're not used to it.
I think all the stadiums have been built from scratch and therefore they're modern and they're spacious. But you make a good point generally about health and safety. And the first sign of that, which we should look out for, should be the airport upon arrival, because Hamad International Airport is, again, very modern. And if fans arrive en masse and that is carnage getting through it, then it's a first indicator that the logistics aren't right. And then we obviously have to look at the metro and the roads. And let's not forget, by the way, that it will be breezy out there. People forget that. And it can even rain. And then at that point, there's not much drainage. And that can be a problem as well. But the actual volume of fans, I think, will be okay. My concern is more that it's a Doha World Cup, which means unlike any other World Cup, every single fan base is going to congregate in pretty much the same areas because it's tiny. So away from the football at night, you've got West Bay and you've got the Pearl, and they'll all be there at night.
It's going to be an absolute nightmare. Look, Ben, thank you very, very much. Ben Jacobs there, sports journalist, just Essentially filling us in on the news that came out today whilst we were on air about some advice to British fans, which might as well just read, please don't go. And if you do go, for goodness sake, don't be gay when you get there. Moving on now. The suspect in the firebombing of a Dover immigration centre is reported to have been posting anti-Muslim rants on Facebook. He was found dead at a nearby service station after the attack. Counter-terror police are now leading this investigation. They say it was, quote, likely to be driven by some form of hate-filled grievance. Well, earlier this afternoon, a union representing Border Force workers at the overcrowded immigration centre in Kent said the Home Office hoped to move 400 people out of that site by the end of today. Almost 40,000 migrants have arrived in the UK after crossing the Channel so far this year. Another 46 people arrived on Monday in one boat. But look, it's kind of like the main event now, ladies and gentlemen, because I've been building up to this throughout the course of the show. So much for us to talk about. I want to know whether or not people feel as though we are being invaded. Where on earth we are expected to put these people? Joining me now, live, is the political editor at the Sunday Mirror and Sunday People. It's Nigel Nelson. And in the studio, I've got research fellow from the Bow Group, a Conservative think tank, Benjamin Loughnane. I will start with you, Nigel, if that's all right. I've got to be honest, a lot of people might think, if you don't like the conditions over here, don't come.
Well, indeed, but they obviously, a lot of these people come from conditions which are far worse. And I live in Kent. I don't actually feel invaded, and I do think that that is kind of inflammatory language and probably shouldn't be used. What we need at the moment to deal with this crisis is a cool head.
Benjamin Loughnane, I will throw it over to you now. Other people might say, well, it's one thing saying that being invaded is inflammatory language, another thing being categorically lied to for a long period of time about the nature of some of the people coming over the channel.
Yeah, I think we've had a cool head about this for the past few years, and numbers have only continued to increase. Clearly, it's time to actually get a grip of this and also identify what the actual issue is, rather than pretending that this is somehow not a problem and that it's not what, Suella Braverman called an invasion. Well, I understand the word invasion might sound slightly incendiary or slightly inflammatory, but at the end of the day, the whole issue is inflammatory. The fact that people are crossing into the country over the channel in the way that they have, with nothing being done about it for the past few years at all, I think that's inflammatory on its own. And I think it's time for I'm actually very happy Suella Braverman has come out and said it.
Nigel, hotels full, houses full, both social and the lower end of the private rental sector. Detention centres full. Where do we put these people?
Well, I mean, that obviously is the huge problem that Suella Braverman is facing. One suggestion would be that caravan parks, for instance, aren't used at this time of year, and maybe she can actually take over those. The more important thing, obviously, to do is to remove the fact that Britain is a draw for people to come across the channel. So where she should be moving to is to change the law whereby asylum has to be claimed in Britain. While that carries on, you're not going to be able to stop people being encouraged to cross 20 miles of water.
OK. Some people would say, Benjamin, that another way of doing it is to actually instill a deterrent. I mean, what Nigel said there literally equates to come to Britain and get a holiday at Butlins, by the sounds of things. But, Benjamin, you could have a deportation thing, but we can't do that, can we? Because that's being blocked as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, when people come over, what we do is we put them in a four-star hotel. Firstly, we pick them up in a boat, taxi them in from halfway in the channel, bring them in, clothe them, feed them, house them, four-star hotels. We are incentivising these crossings. The way to stop them is to stop putting so many incentives in for people to actually make the crossings in the first place. All of this sort of soft touch approach of, we need to make it more comfortable, we need to make it more easier. None of that's going to work. You actually need to say, if you come here, you will be removed, and we're not going to facilitate you. We're not going to pick you up halfway in the channel and then put you in a hotel. We're going to remove you straight away. In fact, what we should be doing is picking them up in the channel and taking them back to France.
Nigel, I have got serious question marks, and unfortunately, I think it's when social unrest starts, not if we keep going the way that we are going and not managing it well enough. But I would maybe differ as to what a lot of people say is who is to blame. I don't think language like the word invasion is to blame. I think, frankly, the likes of Tony Blair maybe kick-starting this policy, and the fact that we're not allowed to deport people, and the fact that people have been burying their heads in the sand and calling anyone who's got reservations about what's going on in the channel a frothing racist gammon for such a long time has allowed this problem to fester, and we end up in a situation, which I think we're going to see, which is tent cities in parks, and goodness knows what happens then. Social unrest will erupt unless we do something now, will it not?
Well, I mean, we'll have to see. I mean, I would hope not. And certainly, protecting our borders is not racist. So I don't think that is the issue. The issue is that we're not doing anything about actually dealing with the problem. Now, when it comes to the point about putting them in hotels, feeding them, clothing them, I mean, what else are you going to do once they're here? You can't send them back to France under international law. Many of them are coming undocumented, so it takes a while to find out where their original country is. Also, they have a perfect legal right. I mean, crossing the channel to claim asylum is not illegal in itself.
Okay.
So they have a legal right to actually claim asylum.
Benjamin, final word to you quite quickly. I'm afraid to say I think it's when, not if, social unrest, serious social unrest breaks out. Who do you blame?
Well, ultimately, if you have a justice system which fails to work, people end up resorting to things like vigilante justice. This is a terrible thing. We shouldn't allow it. It shouldn't be encouraged. But the government need to prevent that from happening by actually enforcing the law in the first place. That one of their primary responsibilities is to ensure the border is secure at all times. If they're failing to do that, what's the point in them even being in government? What's the point in them sitting in 10 Downing Street and in Parliament and in Cabinet every week if they're not able to conduct the basic responsibilities of their office? I think it's an absolute disgrace, and it's been going on for 3 years now, and it needs to stop as soon as possible.
Both of you, thank you very much. Good stuff there. That was political editor at the Sunday Mirror and Sunday People, Nigel Nelson, and in the studio with me right here was research fellow at the Bow Group Conservative think tank, Benjamin Loughnane. Wow, ladies and gentlemen, there we are. GBViews at gbnews.uk is, of course, that address. He's been kicking off in there throughout. I was asking you whether or not you thought we were being invaded, in line with what Suella Braverman said, and Roger said, invasion, Patrick, you must be joking. It's an absolute disaster. There we go. Michelle Dewberry is just over the way over there. I'll throw it over to you. Michelle, what you got coming up on Jubes & Co?
Hello, Patrick. Yes, another day, another energy company posting soaring profits, of course, because of the situation in Ukraine. So many people now are saying that's it. It's time for energy to be nationalised in this country. Is it really? We'll be getting into that. And, of course, Matt Hancock. Should he really be doing a celebrity, I trip over the words because he's not a celebrity, is he? Let's be sensible. But nonetheless, do you think serving MPs should be allowed to go off and do reality TV shows? And, of course, migration. Can't end my show without talking about that, as you've been mentioning, Patrick. The whole kind of argument regarding the language of invasion rumbles on today. It's not going to end anytime soon, so I'll look a bit more at that.
Good stuff, Michelle. Thank you very much. I look forward to the day where you're on I'm a Celebrity. Get me out of here. I'm not sure. I think they'd have to pay you. They couldn't afford you. There you go. If you pick that up, I think she's telling the truth as well there. Right, thank you very much, everybody. Always an absolute pleasure to be joined from 3 till 6 by you wonderful people. And thank you very much, everyone who's been getting in touch with me throughout the show as well. And the emails, on Twitter. It really is only you guys that, frankly, make the world go round as far as I'm concerned. So thank you very, very much. Nice to restore some sanity. I've been Patrick Christys. This has been GB News Live. I'll be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. Don't you dare move, because Jubes is in the building.
Evening. More wet and windy weather to come tomorrow. For some places, a very soggy day, and in areas the gusts could cause a few problems. There are warnings in place. Not everywhere we'll see the wet and windy weather, but for most, this area of low pressure is going to bring a pretty turbulent spell, starting tomorrow across Northern Ireland and then spreading widely across the UK. Before we get there, there's plenty of showers around this evening. Quite a wet evening across parts of northern England and southern Scotland. As outbreaks of rain there will work out into the North Sea. We're left with a few scattered showers around western coasts, but many places elsewhere will become dry and clear. The wind's easing a touch across the south as well, which will allow it to be a little cooler than recent nights, well down into single figures, certainly in rural areas. So a fresher start, but a bright sunny start for quite a few in the morning. However, it won't last. Here comes that weather system clouding over across Northern Ireland. Look at the heavy rain there, the bright colours, the yellows, the oranges, the reds, and that line of heavy rain lasts across Northern Ireland for most of the morning, then spreads into western Scotland and eventually in the afternoon into parts of northwest England and much of Wales. All the while, the winds will be picking up, particularly close to that very heavy rain. Eastern England generally staying dry for most of daylight hours, but even here it will turn windy. Still quite mild in the south, but obviously not feeling all that mild with that wet and windy weather swinging through. There are both rain and wind warnings in place for that weather front as it comes through during the course of Wednesday. And it lingers into the night and indeed into Thursday. Of course, East Anglia in the southeast after a largely dry